Game of Thrones. Reign of the Dragon King Chapter 91. Broken Bonds. Daenerys felt Viserys' arm wrap firmly around her waist, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Her nakedness suddenly felt like a vulnerability she couldn't afford as he carried her to the bed. The pressure of his hand against her mouth made breathing difficult, apple fragments still stuck between her teeth. He sat down on her bed, placing her unceremoniously on his lap as if she were still the child he'd once carried across the narrow sea. Instinctively, she tried to squirm away, but his grip tightened just enough to prevent escape without causing pain. "The night view here is beautiful," he said, gesturing toward the window with his free hand. "Honestly better than King's Landing. You'd agree if you saw it." His casual tone made her stomach twist. Was this the same man who had threatened to cut her baby from her womb? Who had sold her to Khal Drogo like a prized mare? "It's kind of crazy that you never got to see it, beyond your infant days," he continued, voice softening with an odd sentimentality that caught her off guard. "Reminds me of how I took care of you back then, in my arms, feeding you and carrying you around since mother was no longer around." Daenerys remained rigid, her heart pounding against her ribs. She could feel droplets of bathwater drying on her skin, the cool night air raising goosebumps across her flesh. Viserys seemed oblivious to her discomfort, lost in memories she barely recalled. "Remember that yellow house in Bravos?" His eyes took on a distant quality. "The one with the red door and the lemon tree. You were so small then, always following me around like a little silver shadow. I used to sneak extra bread for you when Sir Willem wasn't looking." His fingers loosened slightly from her mouth. Daenerys remained still, confusion washing over her. Why was he talking like this? These gentle memories seemed incompatible with the brother who had pinched and twisted her flesh when angry, who had threatened to wake the dragon at the slightest provocation. "I taught you to say your first words," he continued, "mother, father, brother, dragon. Always dragon. Even then, you knew what we were." He chuckled softly. "Even when we had to flee in the middle of the night, when they came for us after Sir Willem died, you didn't cry. Brave little thing." The pressure of the apple against her lips eased, and Daenerys resisted the immediate urge to scream. Something in his reminiscence held her captive more effectively than his physical restraint. "We sailed on so many ships after that," he sighed. "I lost count. Sick and starving half the time, but I always made sure you ate first. Remember that merchant in Pentos who took us in before Illyrio? Fat bastard tried to touch you once. I broke his fingers, even though he threw us out after. No one touches a dragon." Without warning, he removed the apple entirely, studying her face as if expecting her to call for help. Daenerys swallowed hard, tasting bitter fruit and something like wary curiosity. "Do you not remember any of that, sister? You should have killed me last time," she said finally, ignoring his question, her voice steadier than she expected. "It's a mistake you didn't. And you're going to regret it when I take your throne and rule your kingdom better than you." A flash of amusement crossed his face. "When did my sister become such a delusional bitch?" He laughed, his arms loosely circling her waist now. "Well, at least you're not trying to shout right now." "There's no point," Daenerys replied coolly, acutely aware of her nakedness against his fine clothing. "If you want to kill me, you can before they'd come to the room. Besides, I don't think you're here to kill me. You're a coward. You can't bring yourself to kill the pet you raised since childhood." His amusement vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like hurt. Daenerys hadn't expected that reaction, and it unsettled her more than his anger would have. "You think I see you as a pet?" he asked, his voice dropping dangerously. "Oh, no, you see me worse," she shot back, emboldened by his reaction. "You see me as a bargaining chip. A fancy toy, someone to give away to 100,000 horse riders, saying you'd have them rape me one after the other if it means they'd give you the throne. Do you not remember that?" He shrugged, spreading his arms wide. "I've had my mistakes. I won't deny that." Seizing the opportunity, Daenerys slipped from his lap, putting distance between them as she turned to face him. The cool night air heightened her awareness of her naked body, but she refused to cower or cover herself. Let him see that she was no longer the frightened girl he had bullied and sold. "What do you want from me, Viserys?" she demanded. "It's Big Brother, did you forget?" he corrected, leaning back on the bed as if he owned it. "I answered that already. I wanted to see my baby sister, so I flew over. I heard your pregnancy was a mess. You must be going through a troubling mental time right now, so I came to console you." "Your only family came to console you." Heat rushed to her face, anger burning away any remnant of fear. "You're not my family," she shouted. The words exploded from her with such force that knocking immediately followed from outside her chamber door. "Khaleesi," Jorah's concerned voice called out. Daenerys hesitated, glancing between the door and Viserys. His smug expression challenged her, as if daring her to call for help. "Don't come in, I'm just throwing a tantrum," she called back, watching Viserys's lips curl into an approving smile. "That was your chance to call for help," he observed. "Jorah will simply die if he tries to resist you, from what I heard about your prowess," she replied, the admission bitter on her tongue. "You're right, that old bastard who's eyeing my beautiful little sister. I'd take the chance to kill him," he said. "Who's your family, if not me?" The question struck deeper than she wanted to admit. She'd spent so long defining herself in opposition to Viserys, to his cruelty, his weakness, his madness, that she hadn't fully confronted their shared blood. "Khal Drogo," she answered, her voice hard as dragonglass. "The man who you sold me to. A real man who gave me a son. The son who I lost because of you." He looked incredibly annoyed by her first words, but by the end, confusion crossed his face. Whoa. This is the first time we've met in more than a year, sister." "What do you mean?" He raised his hands defensively. "I ain't no baby killer." "Not directly," she said bitterly. "You killed him indirectly." "Really? I don't recall." Daenerys felt old wounds reopen, bleeding fresh grief into her mind. "Damn it. Because of you, because you threatened me with a sword and showed the Dothraki how weak their call was for letting you escape. Another Dothraki challenged Drogo's right to lead. You made him look weak in front of his blood riders, so they challenged him." The memories crashed through her like waves against rock. Drogo's wound festering, the witch Miri Moshe Dur's betrayal, the stillness of her child's tiny body. Drogo accepted the challenge to prove his strength. He won, but the wound became infected. Her willpower trembled with the effort of containing her rage. "I trusted a witch to heal him, she poisoned him instead. When I begged her to save him, she took my son's life essence. When he was born," the thoughts caught in her throat. She couldn't speak of the scales, the twisted limbs, the tiny wings that would never fly. "You were the first link in that chain, Viserys," she glared at him. "Your cowardice cost me everything I loved." "You don't have to know," she replied, swallowing back the rest. "You're a piece of shit. The only thing you need to know is that I'll kill you. No matter what, I'll kill you." Viserys shook his head slowly. "Sounds like you're just blaming me for the sake of it," he said. "Maybe you're putting the blame on me for something you did. I don't know. I find the hate very wrongful. It pains me, actually. First, you get mad at me for selling you off to the Dothraki, then you blame me for somehow killing that said Dothraki husband of yours. Isn't that quite contradictory?" "Shut up," she shouted, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. Viserys sighed, studying her with a look that said he found her expression uncomfortably familiar. "I see that father's madness has swept deeper in you than it did in me." Then again, when he impregnated mother, he was already mad. His seeds weren't the best. The insult cut through Daenerys like a knife. "Are you insulting my blood now?" "I am," he confirmed coldly. "Because you're being a stupid little bitch right now. Your brother made a mistake, sure, I'll acknowledge that, and you can hate me for it. I'm fine with that, but you're blaming me for something I've never done. You're going mad, sister. At this rate, you'll kill everyone you've saved." "I'm not you," she growled, every muscle in her body tensed with hatred. "I am Viserys Targaryen," he replied, his voice taking on a theatrical formality. "King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. Of course, you're not me, sister. I'm not a failure bitch who trusted a witch and had her husband killed. How the fuck is that my fault, you stupid fucking slut?" His words landed like physical blows. Daenerys stood frozen, shock replacing anger. How did he know about those things? The vulgarity seemed beneath the regal persona he'd cultivated, a glimpse of the old Viserys breaking through the new facade. "Sorry, I wasn't supposed to curse at you," he groaned, running a hand through his silver hair. "But you have to understand how frustrating you are. I'm trying to reconcile, and you're trying to kill me for nothing. And did you ever ask why I married you off? To take the Dothraki army and, indeed, you're mad and easy to manipulate," he cut her off. "How could I, your coward brother, strike a deal with the Dothraki?" That gave Daenerys pause. She'd never questioned the arrangement. It was Illyrio who brokered it, and Viserys had agreed. How much of that was Viserys' own decision? I was stupid back then, so I fell for it, Viserys continued. But you're saying you're not stupid, right? Then you'll figure out the truth on your own. I don't want to hand-feed you everything. Not anymore. You're not the cute baby sister I remember anymore. Although your decisions say otherwise, you're not a child anymore. Anger flared again, bright and hot in her chest. You talk a lot of bullshit for a piece of shit who couldn't harm a fly without magic. Who did you beg for these powers? I'd have taken the throne regardless of these powers, sister. I'd just have needed a bit more time and had to be a little more cautious. His voice carried absolute conviction. I'd admit, these powers allowed me to be reckless and do things without thinking through much since they allowed me incredible protection. But if I didn't have them, I have the blood of dragons, and I'd have conquered the world regardless. Do you even realize who I am? Bullshit, she spat. He laughed, a sound that reminded her of breaking glass. You're the one who would have gotten yourself killed without me. Do you really trust Varys? And his people? That bastard young Griff? You really think our nephew is alive? Are you aware of his connection with Illyrio the merchant? The sudden shift caught her off guard. Oh, of course he is our nephew, she said, her conviction wavering despite herself. Rhaegal accepted him as a rider. That proves his Targaryen blood, Blackfyre blood, he cut her off sharply. You're really a stupid fucking bitch. You're destined to die in this world without me. The accusation hung in the air between them. Blackfyre, the name of rebellion, of bastard Targaryens who had tried to claim the throne for generations. She knew the Golden Company originally started with them, but Viserys stood abruptly. Whatever, you've soured my mood enough, so I'm going to leave now. Daenerys scoffed, though uncertainty gnawed at her. So I was right, you really are so stupid that you won't take me seriously. You're still leaving me alive. You'll regret this, brother. That made him grin. Ah, that's my little sister. You just called me brother again. How I've missed that. He slowly walked over and pinched her cheeks like she was a child. She shoved his hands away, and he just laughed. As a reward, I'm only going to break one of your arms. What? Before she could process his words, his hand seized her elbow. With a quick, brutal motion, he slammed it backward. Pain exploded through Daenerys's arm, white-hot and all-consuming. She heard a scream tear from her throat, the sound primal and agonizing. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, cradling her shattered elbow as waves of nausea rolled through her. The door burst open, Jorah leading a contingent of unsullied guards, their spears leveled at Viserys. K. Khaleesi. Jorah's voice sounded distant through the haze of pain as he rushed to her side. The Unsullied formed a protective barrier, their weapons pointed at her brother. Esser Jorah, Viserys acknowledged, completely ignoring the spears. Thank you for taking care of her. Although it pisses me off that you look at her that way, I do admit you're a fine guard for her who's done his job right. Take her to a physician. Her arm should get fixed in no time since it's a clean break. I just wanted to show her how weak she is before me. And I wanted to hurt her a little, she was pissing me off. Daenerys clutched her arm, each heartbeat sending fresh pulses of agony through the limb. Through tears of pain, she saw Jorah's face contort with rage. Viserys, he shouted, how dare you? It's your grace for you, Esser. Keep your tone in check, her brother replied icily, turning toward the window. I'll be around the city, but don't try to search for me. You can't, and if someone does manage to catch my scent, I'd just kill them. There's no point in losing soldiers like that, is there? One of the Unsullied, thankfully not Grey Worm, she realized through her agony, lunged forward with a battle cry. Stop right there. Ha! The spear thrust was lightning fast, but Viserys moved faster. He sidestepped with inhuman grace, his fist striking the Unsullied's armored stomach with a sickening crunch. Metal buckled inward as his hand punched through, then emerged clutching something dark and glistening. The Unsullied collapsed instantly, his spine dangling from Viserys's bloodied fist. Horror silenced the room. Daenerys felt bile rise in her throat as Viserys casually reached for one of her silk robes hanging nearby. He wiped the blood from his hand with deliberate slowness. I let Jorah live, but I won't tolerate the same disrespect from these mindless baboons, he said to her, examining his now clean fingers. I'll see you later, baby sister. With that, he strode to the window and leapt out into the night air, leaving behind a defeated Dany who glared at the ground. Her brother, just what happened to him? Chapter 92. The Sons of Harpy. I leapt from the Mother of Dragons' chamber windows, wings sprouting from my back to carry me safely to the street below. Landing silently, I retracted them and stepped into the shadows. The satisfying crunch of her arm breaking still echoed in my mind. Meereen slumbered under a bruised purple sky. Dawn wasn't far off, casting the city in that peculiar half-light where night surrenders to morning. The narrow streets remained largely deserted, though a few early risers, bakers, servants, and the occasional drunk staggering home, moved like wraiths through the gloom. I wiped a speck of blood from my hand that I'd missed earlier. The unsullied spine had been surprisingly easy to rip out. These legendary warriors weren't so legendary when facing someone of my caliber. Just how strong was I now? The memory of my sister's face flashed through my mind, her violet eyes wide with pain and shock as I snapped her arm. My little sister, my Dany. The sound of her pain bothered me more than she knew it did. Fuck, I muttered, kicking a stray stone down the empty street. A pair of servants scurrying along the opposite side caught sight of me and quickened their pace, heads bowed. Ha, even strangers could sense the storm brewing inside me. I didn't want to hurt her, but I'd planned so. I'd come to warn her about the Blackfire pretender at her side, but she had to blame me for everything, even her oh-so-precious horse lord's death. As if I'd orchestrated that from across the narrow sea while fighting for my life. Stupid fucking bitch. No wonder she died at Jon Snow's hands in the original timeline. As I walked, the red walls of Meereen's buildings seemed to close in around me. A torch guttered in a nearby alcove, its dying flame reflecting in a puddle at my feet. I raised her. I fed her when there was barely enough for me, only for her to act so high and mighty in my presence. The memories surfaced unbidden. Bravos. The house with the red door. Sneaking extra bread to Dany when her little stomach growled. Carrying her on my shoulders through the market. Telling her stories of dragons and our ancestors. Her tiny hand clutching mine as we fled in the night after Esser Willem died. I'd been little more than a child myself then. A boy of 5 trying to care for a toddler. No one had taught me how. Yet I did, for she was my last family, and now that frightened boy who once carried his sister across continents had broken her arm without hesitation. For she deserved it. Why did the very last of the Targaryens have to share such a bad relationship? I paused at a small square where a fountain bubbled softly. Sitting on its edge, I stared at my reflection in the water. The king who stared back looked troubled. She blames me for everything, I muttered. I didn't kill fucking Khal Drogo, but I wish I had. I really did. That fucking barbarian idiot. I wasn't myself. Back then, I lacked these powers, but the memories of my torment at the Dothraki's hands still were my memory. However, it'd be unwise to get swept by emotions now. I knew who was the cause of these incidents, so I had to take care of them myself. It was all Varys and Illyrio. Those conniving spiders had manipulated me, used my desperation to further their Blackfire plot. I'd always suspected Varys wasn't what he seemed. Back on Earth, theories had circulated about his true identity, a Blackfire descendant working to restore his line to the throne. That's why he was always bald, stopping his silver hair from showing, and Illyrio. That fat merchant had arranged the marriage to Drogo, not me. He'd proposed the idea to me, baited me to accept it, and the foolish me fell for it. Illyrio Mopatis was most likely young Griff's father. I was a fool. Then, I whispered to my reflection. But she's the fool now. I recalled how gentle she'd once been. The sweet girl who'd braid flowers into her silver hair. The sister who'd crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Those days were gone. Irretrievably lost. Was breaking her arm necessary? The question nagged at me. Perhaps I could have shown my strength differently. Yet the snap of her bone beneath my fingers had felt satisfying. A physical manifestation of our differences. Of how weak she was without me. She needed to understand that she couldn't match me, that her dreams of taking my throne were childish fantasies. She had to learn, I decided aloud, pushing off from the fountain. My footsteps echoed on the cobblestones as I moved deeper into the sleeping city. The sky lightened gradually, and the stars faded like distant memories. She called me a coward. Me, the man who'd conquered Westeros. Who'd beaten Stannis Baratheon in single combat. Who commanded a dragon. How foolish was she, truly. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and a window shuttered hastily as I passed. Perhaps it was my authority stat, but it seemed that my anger caused others to flinch. Well, what now? My thoughts had calmed down, but my emotions hadn't. I needed to unwind, to release this tension building in my chest. Sex had always been my preferred method. But I was a king now, the most powerful man in the world. Common whores weren't going to cut it. The thought of visiting the area where the old masters once lived appealed to me. Many had been killed during Daenerys' conquest, leaving widows behind. Proud, high-born women who'd broken down after their husbands' deaths. Of course, the first wife was killed alongside their wives, but the concubines remained. I smiled at the thought as the first true rays of sunlight broke over Meereen's eastern wall. It shouldn't be too hard to seduce a widow. Dawn crept over Meereen like a thief, stealing darkness inch by inch. I strolled through the eastern quarter where the crumbling mansions stood in faded glory, monuments to wealth that Daenerys had upended. The streets remained empty save for chirping birds and the occasional servant hurrying on early errands. The worn facades of these once grand homes reminded me of King's Landing after my conquest. Empty palaces, abandoned by fleeing nobles, their treasures left behind in hasty retreat. I'd walk those halls feeling like a god among ruins. The same hollowness lurked under that triumph as it did now. What value was power if it broke everything in its grasp? My sister didn't know how to protect. I adjusted the dark wig and covered my silver-white hair. Better to move anonymously for now, especially after the scene at the Great Pyramid. The Unsullied might start searching everywhere, even if I warned them not to. A woman's sharp voice caught my attention as I rounded a corner. Expect you to show gratitude after all these years. My husband fed you, clothed you, and you repay me like this during my bad times. I paused, slipping into the shadow of a stone archway. In a small courtyard ahead, a slender woman in faded finery stood before 3 servants. Her posture was rigid with indignation, and she turned her back to me. She looked attractive even from a distance. Spoiler, fed as scraps and beat as for sport, one of the servants replied, an old man with stooped shoulders and defiant eyes. The mother of dragons freed us. We're not your slaves anymore. We stay or go as we please now. And you still need to eat, don't you? The woman snapped, desperation creeping into her voice. Where will you go? What skills do you have beyond serving? The servants exchanged glances before the youngest, a girl no older than 16, spat at the woman's feet. We'd rather starve than serve house. Gazing again, they departed without another word, leaving the woman trembling with fury. She watched them leave before muttering a string of curses. Dragon whore, silver-haired bitch. I hope the masters of the other cities come and crucify her as she did my love. I couldn't help but smile at her venom. Here was someone who hated my sister as much as I did at this moment. I stepped from the shadows. Careful with such words. If the mother of dragons hears them, you'll find yourself joining those crucified masters. The woman whirled, hand flying to her throat. Now I could see her properly, olive skin, amber eyes, and dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. Beautiful once, before hardship had carved lines at the corners of her mouth and between her brows. Although I guessed a shower would return her beauty easily. Who are you to sneak up on a noblewoman? She demanded, lifting her chin. Her Giscari accent thickened her common tongue, but her diction was precise, educated. A passing stranger, I replied, approaching slowly. One who finds himself intrigued by such passionate hatred in the early morning hours. She assessed me with narrowed eyes. A well-dressed stranger, too clean for a sellsword, too arrogant for a merchant. Hey, perhaps I'm a knight, from Westeros. Her gaze sharpened with interest. Have you news of the false dragon who sits their throne? The brother of our queen. She spat the last word. I smiled, a sharp thing with too many teeth. I've heard he's a fearsome conqueror. Nothing like the weak exile he once was. Defeated King Joffrey, and took his mother queen on his bed. Fearsome, she scoffed. Another mad Targaryen, no doubt. Their line breeds madness like rats breed disease. The insult made me amused rather than angry. I stepped closer, my smile hardening. And what are you now, my lady? A noble with no servants, a master with no slaves. Your world has crumbled around you, yet you stand in its ruins, cursing the one who brought the stones down. You're in a foul mood for so early in the day, she observed, refusing to retreat despite my advance. Did someone cut off your cock in the night, or were you born this bitter? I laughed, a little surprised by her fire. You're a fiery one, Lady Nareen. Lady Nareen Zo gazing, she straightened her faded silk dress. And you haven't answered my question. Let's say I've had a disappointing family reunion. Ah, understanding flickered in her eyes. Family. The sharpest knives are always wielded by those who share our blood. I suppose I can relate to that, after my coward oldest son fled, leaving me alone in this ruined city. He should have died with his father. I stepped closer, drawn to the defiance in her posture. Here was no cowering servant or simpering courtier, but a woman who'd lost everything and still wore her pride like armor. "You're not afraid of me reporting to the queen?" I asked. "Should I be?" She arched a brow. "I've watched my husband flayed alive. I've seen my youngest son's head displayed on a pike. What more can any man do to me?" "Many things," I murmured, reaching out to touch a strand of her dark hair. "Some might even be pleasant." Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. That had taken her off guard, and she observed me properly for the first time, eyes going over my muscles. "You presume much, Esser. And you pretend disinterest poorly." I traced a finger along her jawline. "Shall we continue this conversation somewhere more private? Your home, perhaps?" Her lips curved into a bitter smile. "What remains of it? The Dragon Queen's freedmen have stripped it of nearly everything valuable." "Then let me see what they left behind," I said. "If they left behind such a beautiful woman, they at least know to appreciate art." That made her scoff out a giggle, pausing for a moment as she made a decision. A moment later, she led me through a side entrance into what had once been a grand home. The entryway still boasted marble floors, though several tiles were cracked or missing. Dusty outlines on the walls marked where paintings or tapestries had hung. A few pieces of heavy furniture remained, too cumbersome for looters to carry, I supposed. Narine moved with practiced grace through the echoing rooms. "I had 30 servants once," she said, her voice hollow. "Now I have ghosts for company. And me," I added, catching her wrist as we entered what must have been a sitting room. "And soon you'll be begging for a son, too." She turned, amber eyes flashing. "You talk a lot for a nameless man. What exactly do you want from me, Esser Knight? I have no gold, no influence. Nothing to offer a man like you." I pulled her against me, one hand sliding down to grasp her waist. It was a slender thing, soft yet firm, as I felt my fingers dig in. "I think we both know that's not true." Her fingers splayed against my chest, neither pushing away nor drawing closer. "Is this how Westerosi knights behave? Taking what they want from women they've just met? Poor widows, grieving over her husband's death." "I'm taking nothing," I said, my lips brushing her ear. "You're giving. There's a massive difference. You can pull away, and I'll walk out." "But, I don't think you're going to do that, are you? You brought me to your home to get fucked all morning." Her body trembled against mine. "You're very sure of yourself." "With good reason." My hand slid lower, gripping her thighs through the thin silk of her dress. "Tell me to stop, and I will." Instead of answering, she bit her lip, eyes darkening as my hand traveled higher. I backed her against the wall, pinning her with my body as my mouth claimed hers. She tasted of wine and bitterness, her kiss hungry and desperate. I tore at her dress, the worn silk giving way easily under my hands. She gasped as cool air hit her exposed skin but made no move to cover herself. Her nails raked down my back, demanding rather than pleading. "The bedroom," she breathed against my mouth. "Upstairs." I didn't answer, just lifted her in one fluid motion and carried her up the marble staircase. A few hours later, I lay on her bed, staring at the painted ceiling while she curled against my side, one slender leg draped over mine. Narine traced idle patterns on my chest, attempting conversations that I had no interest in. My thoughts had already turned back to the city, to Daenerys, to the pretender at her side. "You're not listening to me," she murmured, propping herself up on one elbow. "No," I admitted without remorse. She studied my face. "You're a strange man. Most want to boast after bedding a woman. You seem elsewhere. Tell me about your hair. Why were you hiding it with a wig? I wonder if she suspects my identity already. There aren't many famous blonde knights in Westeros. Not with family members in Meereen." I chuckled. I was about to reply when the bedroom door swung open. My brows tightened. 6 figures entered, their faces hidden behind grotesque golden masks shaped like harpies. Narine stiffened beside me, her body going rigid with fear. "That means she's not involved." "Good. I don't want to kill someone I just slept with." Viserys Targaryen, the foremost harpy said, his voice muffled behind the mask. "It's good to see you relax. I believe we can work together. Let's talk." So they'd known who I was all along. The wig hadn't fooled them. Interesting. I sighed, leaning back against the pillows. Rather than answer them, I turned to Narine, cupped her face in my hand, and kissed her deeply. She responded automatically, though confusion and shock radiated from her body. The sons of the harpy stood silently, waiting as I ignored them. Power wasn't just about strength, it was about making others wait while you did exactly as you pleased. When I was done, I turned to face them. Now, what do I do with these bastards? Chapter 93. Myronese Problems. Once I was done kissing my Myronese widow, I looked at the 6 masked men crowding the doorway, their harpy masks gleaming dully in the bedroom's dim light. My arm remained casually draped around Narin's shoulder, fingers tracing her curves beneath the sheet she'd hastily pulled over herself. Her body trembled against mine, eyes wide with fear as she stared at the intruders. "Well," I prompted, not bothering to cover myself. "You've interrupted something pleasant. Speak." The masked figures exchanged glances, shifting uncomfortably. The leader, distinguished by red threading on his mask, cleared his throat. "Let's move to a different place. This place," he glanced disparagingly around the room, at the rumpled sheets and discarded clothing, "smells." I laughed, low and dangerous. "No, if you don't want to talk, then leave." Narin pressed closer to me, her fingernails digging into my arm. I could feel her heart pounding against my side. One of the other harpies stepped forward, his voice higher and more insistent. "You have the wrong idea, foreign bastard. It's not a request, My hand moved before he finished the sentence. The dagger appeared between my fingers as if conjured from thin air, a trick of my inventory, and sailed across the room with deadly precision. It struck the speaker's throat with a wet thud, embedding itself to the hilt. Blood sprayed in an arc as he collapsed, hands clutching uselessly at the blade. Gurgling sounds escaped his mask as he thrashed once, twice, and went still. "Hawk!" Narin's gasp was sharp beside me, her body curling inward as if trying to disappear into the sheets. The remaining harpies flinched, then 2 lunged forward, weapons appearing from beneath their robes. "Stop, all of you!" Their leader barked, throwing out an arm to halt them. The attackers froze mid-step, their tension palpable even through their masks. The leader nodded slowly, his posture stiffening as he turned back to me. "Forgive the misunderstanding," he said, stepping over his fallen comrade without a second glance. "We came to propose an alliance, King Viserys." I arched an eyebrow. "Is that so? The Dragon Queen is no friend to Meereen," he continued, encouraged by my response. "Her reforms have brought only chaos. The old families suffer while former slaves riot in the streets. Trade falters, order crumbles. We know your relationship isn't the best, so we're here to offer an alliance." I gestured for him to continue, my expression one of cold amusement. "We have networks throughout the city. Resources, information. We can help destabilize her rule, create opportunities for a different approach. I'm sure you know what I'm trying to say." His voice lowered conspiratorially. The spoils of her failure would be substantial. And who better to claim them than her own blood? Throughout his pitch, Narin remained silent beside me, her eyes darting between the masks and my face. When I shifted to sit up straighter, she clutched the blanket to her chest, her knuckles white. "Interesting proposition," I said finally. "Give me a moment." I rose from the bed, unconcerned with my nakedness, and walked to a wardrobe in the corner. Opening it, I saw fine men's clothing, the remnants of her husband's wardrobe. I selected a midnight blue robe embroidered with silver thread. "Your husband had good taste," I remarked to Narin as I slipped it on. She swallowed visibly. He imported the fabric from Karth," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The sons of the Harpy watched silently as I cinched the robe and turned back to face them, my bare feet silent on the marble floor. "You've made your case eloquently," I said, approaching them. "And I've reached my decision." Without warning, I struck. My fist crushed through the nearest Harpy's mask and the face beneath it in one fluid motion. Before his body hit the floor, I'd already moved to the next, ripping his head clean off with a savage twist. The third managed a strangled cry before my elbow caved in his chest. The fourth tried to flee but made it only 2 steps before I caught him, snapping his spine with an audible crack. It took perhaps 3 seconds. Blood spattered across the walls and pooled on the marble floor. Narin's scream died in her throat as she pressed herself against the headboard, blanket clutched to her face, eyes wide with horror above it. Only the leader and 1 other remained, both frozen in place. "You," I pointed to the subordinate, "can leave. Tell whoever sent you that I will tolerate no further interference in my affairs. You can continue your plans against my sister. I won't meddle, but do not try to wind me into your numbers." The man stood paralyzed with fear. "Go," I barked, and he scrambled backward through the door, nearly tripping over the bodies of his comrades. I turned to the leader, who hadn't moved. In another life, don't disturb a king during his relaxation hours, I said, and with a casual gesture, I broke his neck, letting his body collapse atop the others. You've killed a human, Sons of Harpy X5. You've received experience points. Sadly, not enough to level up. Blood coated my hands and speckled the borrowed robe. I walked to a basin of water on a nearby table and began methodically washing the gore from my skin. I apologize for the mess, I said, glancing at Nareen. She stared back, her complexion ashen. Her breath came in quick, shallow pants. And no, you don't have to apologize. Forgive me, Your Grace, she stammered once she found her voice. I wasn't aware of your status. I shot her an irritated look. Oh, drop the formalities. You were biting my shoulder a moment ago. I don't like the change. She stared at me for a long moment before her shoulders visibly relaxed, though her eyes remained fixed on the carnage littering her bedroom floor. That was fucking scary, you know. She whispered. You should have started your pitch with your identity. I'd have been glad to bed a king. I couldn't help but laugh at the immediate change in her attitude. She also cursed like a wanton whore. The noble lady's proper facade had cracked so thoroughly in the space of a morning. Daenerys shifted on the ebony bench that served as her throne, trying to find a position that didn't send fresh waves of agony through her splinted arm. The midday heat turned the Great Pyramid's audience chamber into a sweltering cage. Sweat beaded along her spine, making the silks of her Milanese tokar cling uncomfortably to her skin. The fighting pits have been part of Meereen since the city was built, Your Grace, Hisdar Zolorak continued, his thin face earnest beneath his elaborately oiled hair. They are to us what the sept is to your Westeros, sacred tradition. Please, Daenerys clenched her jaw. This was the third time in as many days that Hisdar had appeared before her with the same request. Each time, his arguments grew more intricate, his reasoning more impassioned. Sacred, she repeated, men slaughtering each other for sport is sacred. Hisdar spread his hands in supplication. To deny the people their traditions is to deny their identity. Already, whispers spread through the lower city. They say the foreign queen scorns their customs, mocks their beliefs. They say this while sleeping in beds. That aren't chains, Daenerys snapped. While breathing air that isn't fouled by a master's whip. The pain in her arm flared, hot and insistent. It made her anger more fiery, which only made her more irritated at Viserys, whose face flashed through her mind, that strange, cold confidence as he'd snapped her bone-like dry kindling. Her brother had been cruel before, but there had been a desperate edge to his cruelty. This new Viserys was something entirely different. Your Grace, Tyrion's voice floated up from below her. The dwarf stood a few steps down, his mismatched eyes thoughtful. If I may, she nodded stiffly. The noble Hisdar isn't wrong, Tyrion said, stroking his stubbled chin. Think about it, lasting change requires compromise. The fighting pits could be reopened under new rules, no slaves, only free men who choose to fight. It would show respect for Milanese customs while maintaining your principles. You support this barbarism. She regretted the sharpness in her tone as soon as the words left her mouth. Tyrion didn't flinch. I support stability, Your Grace. The fighting pits bring trade. Trade brings wealth. Wealth brings peace. Peace brings opportunity for the reforms you truly care about. Ser Jorah cleared his throat. The imp speaks sense, Khaleesi. Your hold on Meereen remains precarious. Even Missandei, usually so reserved, nodded slightly. The people would see it as a gesture of respect, Your Grace. Daenerys looked from one advisor to the next, finding the same counsel in each face. Only 2 days ago, she might have held firm against them all. But Viserys' appearance had changed everything. She needed allies in this city, and quickly. She exhaled, rubbing her temple with her hand. Finally, she said, I wish to discuss this matter with my nephew. I also have some other important matters to discuss with him. Has he not responded to my call yet? No, Khaleesi, Missandei answered, her eyes reflecting concern. Daenerys frowned. Odd, he's never this late. Her gaze swept the chamber, suddenly noticing another absence. And Varys isn't here today either. A cold prickle of unease crawled up her spine. First, Viserys appeared with impossible strength and a dragon, then broke her arm and vanished. Now, both Aegon and Varys were missing. These couldn't be coincidences. Do you want me to visit his quarters, Your Grace? Ser Barristan asked, his weathered hand resting on his sword hilt. I'll bring him here. Daenerys considered the question. Aegon was a grown man, not a child to be checked upon. But with Viserys in the city, yes, she decided. Please do, Sir Barristan. And, bring Grey Worm and a squad with you. She had a bad feeling about this. It wouldn't hurt to be careful. The old knight bowed and departed, his white cloak whispering across the stone floor. She turned her attention back to Hisdar, who stood patient and hopeful. An idea formed in her mind, one that would stabilize her position in Meereen while simultaneously sending a message to her brother. You, she said, focusing on Hisdar. If the decision to hold the games is finalized, I have another plan to follow suit. She paused, letting the tension build. I shall marry you. That should help strengthen my hold in the city by marrying a Meereenese man. Hisdar's jaw slackened, his carefully constructed poise crumbling into naked shock. He opened and closed his mouth twice before stammering, "Why, your grace? I am overwhelmed by such an honor." As you should be, Daenerys allowed herself a small, satisfied smirk. The political advantages were clear, but she couldn't deny the smaller, pettier pleasure in imagining Viserys' face when he learned she'd wed a Meereenese noble. Her brother had once sold her to a Dothraki Khal, but now she would choose her own husband from among men he considered beneath him. I would be a good husband to you, your grace, Hisdar continued, recovering his composure. My family has ruled Meereen for generations. I know its customs, its people. We will discuss the details later, she interrupted, suddenly weary. The throbbing in her arm had spread to her shoulder, making it difficult to think clearly. For now, you may go. As Hisdar bowed and backed away, Tyrion approached the throne. A bold move, your grace, he said quietly. Though I wonder if a hasty marriage is wise, given recent developments. What if that maddens your brother? My brother broke my arm yesterday. That means he's mad enough, she replied, keeping her voice low. He also killed an Unsullied with his bare hands and claims my nephew is a Blackfire pretender. I need stronger roots in this city, and I need them now. Tyrion's eyes widened slightly at her bluntness. As you say, your grace. Though if I may suggest, perhaps we should investigate these claims about young Griff before proceeding too far with either the marriage or the fighting pits. Daenerys frowned. You think Viserys might be telling the truth? I think, Tyrion said carefully, that in my experience, the most dangerous lies always contain a seed of truth. Well, we'll learn about it soon anyhow when Sir Barristan returns. Chapter 94. The Greatest Night. Sir Barristan and Grey Worm both realized something was wrong when they reached Aegon's living quarters. The door hung ajar, swinging slightly in the hot Meereenese breeze. Inside, drawers were emptied, clothes scattered, and personal effects missing. Barristan's hand instinctively moved to his sword hilt. Search the other rooms, he ordered the 6 Unsullied who accompanied them. Grey Worm moved with silent efficiency, directing his men with hand signals. Barristan paced the main chamber, examining the scattered evidence of hasty departure. A discarded blue hair dye bottle lay tipped on its side, staining the stone floor. Nothing, Sir Barristan, Grey Worm reported, his common tongue stilted but clear. He gone. Barristan swore under his breath. The Golden Company commanders. We will check, Grey Worm replied. They marched to the section of the pyramid reserved for the sellsword officers. Most of the rank and file remained in their quarters, looking confused and directionless, but Harry Strickland, John Connington, and the other commanders were nowhere to be found. The dragon, Barristan said suddenly, his heart sinking. We must check the dragon. The pit where Rhaegal was kept was a short distance from the Great Pyramid. As they approached, Barristan couldn't hear the familiar sound of a dragon chained within. Barristan's worst fears were confirmed when they entered the massive chamber. Rhaegal's restraints lay empty and broken on the stone floor. The Queen's nephew is a snake, Grey Worm said, his face hardening. Barristan felt sick. The so-called Aegon Targaryen, fearing a confrontation with Viserion the Gold Dragon atop Rhaegal, had fled Meereen. The boy who claimed to be Rhaegar's son, a prince Barristan had sworn to protect in what felt like another lifetime ago, was nothing but a pretender. Or was he indeed Aegon, and just fled out of fear? Perhaps he's just out for a stroll with Rhaegal. That could also be the case. Barristan couldn't tell. Rage bubbled in his blood, making it hard to think straight. Quick, Barristan said as they exited the dragon pit, Grey Worm and the Unsullied squad walking fast toward the pyramid again. We need to notify the Queen and then chase whichever direction that boy fled. Doesn't this, Grey Worm started, hesitating, doesn't this confirm Viserys Targaryen's claim that this Aegon is a fake? Barristan didn't answer, fearful of what Daenerys' reaction would be. The Queen had invested hope in this supposed nephew, another Targaryen to share her burden. This betrayal would crush her, especially coming so soon after her brother's assault. They chose an alleyway to make faster progress back to the Great Pyramid. The narrow passage wound between tall buildings, offering shade from the merciless sun but also limiting visibility. Barristan's instincts, honed by decades of knighthood, prickled with warning. "Stop," he commanded, hand flying to his sword hilt. "We're surrounded." All around them, from both exits, sons of the Harpy appeared, golden masks catching the dim light as they blocked the alley. Each carried curved daggers or short swords, and they outnumbered the queen's men 3-1. Damn it all, Barristan drew his sword in one fluid motion. The six Unsullied instantly formed a protective formation around Barristan and Grey Worm, spears leveled outward. The sons of Harpy didn't bother trying to speak. The first Harpy rushed forward with a wild cry. An Unsullied spear took him in the throat, but two more followed. The alley erupted into brutal chaos. Barristan moved with the speed and precision that had made him legendary. His blade sang through the air, finding gaps in armor and flesh with deadly accuracy. One Harpy fell, clutching at his open belly. Another lost his sword hand before Barristan's backswing opened his throat. Grey Worm fought with efficient brutality beside him, his spear a blur as he impaled a Harpy through the chest and kicked the corpse free to engage the next attacker. The six Unsullied fought fearlessly. One drove his spear through two attackers with a single thrust, but another found his throat. Another Unsullied wielded his broken spear shaft as a staff, crushing a Harpy's skull before a dagger found his heart. One by one, the Unsullied fell, overwhelmed by the sheer number of attackers pouring into the alley. Back to back, Barristan shouted to Grey Worm as the last Unsullied collapsed. They fought on, surrounded by the bodies of fallen men. Barristan's sword arm grew heavy, his breath coming in short gasps. A shallow cut across his forearm leaked blood, and another slash had torn through his white cloak. Grey Worm bled from a gash on his forehead, but his spear continued to claim lives. Barristan cut down a Harpy who lunged for him, then barely parried a thrust aimed at his throat. His reactions were slowing. In his prime, none of these men would have touched him, but time was merciless. Age had finally caught up with Sir Barristan the Bold. He didn't see the Harpy who circled behind him, spear raised to strike between his shoulder blades. "Careful," Grey Worm yelled, but it was too late. Barristan tensed, anticipating the pain of cold steel piercing his heart. Instead, he heard a wet thud and a gurgling cry. A gleaming spear had intercepted the attack, its blood-slick tip protruding from the Harpy's chest. Behind the dying man stood an armored figure in burnished red plate adorned with black dragonglass rubies, armor Barristan had not seen in decades. "I didn't want to step in," Viserys Targaryen said, yanking his spear free as the Harpy crumpled, "but it irritates me to see mere slaves daring to harm the greatest swordsman the Seven Kingdoms has ever seen." "Ah, rest easy, Sir. I'm here." What followed defied belief. Viserys moved through the remaining Harpies like a dancer among statues. His spear whirled, stabbed, slashed, and pierced with inhuman speed. The red armor gleamed as he pivoted, every movement economical yet devastatingly effective. A Harpy lunged as Viserys sidestepped and drove his spear through the man's eye socket. Two more attacked simultaneously, his spear shaft cracked one mask while the point opened the others. Throat. Four charged together. Viserys leapt impossibly high, coming down with his spear driving through one man's skull before sweeping the others off their feet and dispatching them with precise thrusts. Barristan watched in stunned silence. The fighting style was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. No knight or sellsword moved with such deadly grace. Within moments, every Harpy lay dead or dying, and Viserys stood among them, not a drop of sweat on his brow. "That's the last of them," he said as the spear vanished from Viserys's hand as if by magic. He approached Barristan, who looked up at him, eyes wide in wonder. For a moment, in that red armor, Barristan could almost believe Rhaegar himself stood before him. "Thank you for the help, Prince Viserys," Barristan managed, his voice hoarse. Even so, he remained loyal to the queen he had given his oath to. So he didn't refer to him as your grace like the rest of Westerosi knights would have. "I fear we would have fallen without your aid. But, Grey Worm needs medical attention immediately. Will you help him, please?" "You need medical help too, Sir," Viserys said, grabbing the unconscious Grey Worm by an arm and dragging him near Sir Barristan. He held the old knight by his arm too and then said, "Don't move too much, don't panic." Then, to Barristan's astonishment, wings sprouted from Viserys's back, great draconic appendages that unfurled like leather sails. So the rumors weren't a lie. With a powerful downward stroke, Viserys launched them skyward, soaring above the buildings toward the Great Pyramid. I soared toward the highest level of the Great Pyramid, wings beating powerfully against the hot marine air. The unconscious Grey Worm hung limp in one arm while Ser Barristan, still awake but weakened, clung to my other side. The old knight's eyes were glazed with pain, but he maintained his composure even as we flew hundreds of feet above the city. Almost there, I told him as we approached the massive structure. The audience chamber's large window loomed ahead, perfect for my entrance. With a final powerful stroke, I sent us gliding through the opening and landed in a crouch, careful not to jostle my injured passengers. Daenerys sat upon her ebony throne, looking every bit the queen in her white and gold tokar. Her splinted arm was a reminder of our last encounter. Ser Jorah Mormont stood faithfully at her side, and his sword immediately cleared its scabbard when he saw me. "Khaleesi," he shouted, stepping between us. Missandei's hands flew to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips as she saw a Grey Worm's bloodied form. Even the usually unflappable Tyrion Lannister, so that's where the little imp had disappeared to, frowned deeply, his mismatched eyes growing wary at my sudden appearance. Unsullied guards rushed out from the corners of the room, surrounding me with spears pointed at my chest. Still crouching with my injured cargo, I found myself the center of a circle of deadly steel. "How dare you hurt my commanders?" Daenerys shouted, her eyes blazing with fury as she rose from her seat. Her good hand gripped the arm of her throne so tightly her knuckles whitened. I shrugged, gently laying Barristan and Grey Worm on the cool stone floor. "Always so quick to judge me, sister," I replied, straightening to my full height as I found myself looming over everyone in the room. The system had granted me great height beside my explosive strength, and I used every bit of that to intimidate the fools around me. The old knight coughed weakly, raising a hand to stay the unsullied spears. "Your Grace," he managed, his voice pained but clear, "Prince Viserys didn't harm us. He saved our lives. The sons of the Harpy ambushed us in the alley. We would have fallen if he hadn't arrived." Daenerys's expression faltered, confusion replacing rage for a moment. "It is a waste that the finest knight alive is serving you, and it'd have been a greater waste for him to die for you," I said, brushing dust from my armor. "So I saved him. I happened to save the unsullied commander, too. Anyways, don't waste time arguing with me and take them to the medics. It takes a lot to make an unsullied go unconscious, and this one's particularly strong. It's an emergency." My sister breathed heavily, clearly struggling with how to respond. Finally, she gestured to her guards. "Take them to my chambers. Summon the healers immediately." 4 Unsullied carefully lifted their injured commander while 2 more helped Barristan. As they carried them away, Daenerys turned her attention back to me, eyes narrowed. "If you're expecting gratitude, you'd be disappointed. Leave. A queen who can't say thank you for saving the best of her fighters is not so queen at all. Here I thought you'd at least offer me tea." I shrugged, the wings on my back retracting into thin air. "And no, I'll be staying for a bit until Ser Barristan receives immediate medical attention. I think he has a fun report to make that you'll enjoy." She wanted to argue but just scoffed and turned to Missandei. "Serve him tea with the best poison we have. Make sure it melts his bones." "Such a fiery sister I have," I said, amused by her futile venom. I turned my attention to the small man watching our exchange with calculating eyes. "Dany, you've been working with dirty Lannisters. Do not insult my advisor, brother," she snapped. I smiled at that. "Fine, since you called me brother, I shall entertain your request." I faced Tyrion fully. "Anyhow, it has been a while, Lord Tyrion. Do you remember me?" Tyrion nodded slowly, his expression guarded. "Yes, who would have thought the eccentric sellsword claiming to be from the Second Sons was actually Viserys Targaryen? It wasn't totally a lie. The Second Sons do serve me," I said. Although currently they were in Dorne, cast out of the city and forced to stay in the sands. I stared at Tyrion, recalling our brief encounter in King's Landing, and pondered his fate. My thoughts were cut short by Daenerys shouting for me to go drink my tea and die. I laughed and allowed Missandei to lead me from the chamber, leaving my sister fuming on her throne. I couldn't wait for Ser Barristan's report. I couldn't wait to see my sister's stupid face when she realized the truth. Chapter 95, Old Friends and New Faces. I sat alone at a small table in the guest chamber, drumming my fingers on the polished wood. The room was pleasant enough, airy and decorated with Milanese artwork depicting hunting scenes. The windows offered a magnificent view of the city below, though I'd seen better from Dragonback. The door opened, and Missandei entered, carrying a silver tray with a teapot and cups. She moved with the grace of someone well trained in service, setting the tray down carefully before me. "Here, my lord," she said, her eyes downcast. "It's insulting to refer to a king as a lord, even if you serve the ruler of a different nation," I corrected, lifting a cup to my nose and inhaling deeply. "And Marine couldn't even be counted as a nation." No poison. Your Khaleesi will be mad to hear you defied her orders." Surprise flickered across her face. "You can smell poison?" she asked, and I shrugged. Anyways, I don't think she wanted me to poison you for real, that'd be silly since she said it out loud. "Please excuse me now," she said, turning to leave. "I'd love a tea companion," I called after her. She paused, looking back with uncertainty. "I am sorry, Your Grace, Khaleesi probably wants me by her side already." "Probably. Then you can take the chance." "Come on, it's lonely to wait by myself," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "And it'd be rude to reject a king." After a moment's hesitation, she sat down, her posture stiff and formal. I poured tea into the second cup and slid it toward her. "Tell me about yourself. Where did my sister find such a fine, intelligent woman to serve her?" She blinked at my choice of words, clearly expecting some comment on her beauty instead. I used to serve the people who made the Unsullied." She freed the Unsullied and me from there, and I joined her of my own will. "That accent, Noth, correct. Island of Butterflies," I said, sipping my tea. "I've read about it, peaceful place until the Slavers came." "You speak how many languages now?" 19, Your Grace," she answered, her shoulders relaxing slightly. I smiled since she didn't call me a lord anymore. "Though some better than others." "Impressive. I barely manage 5 myself. Though I suspect you learned yours under harsher circumstances than I did mine." She nodded, taking a small sip of her tea. "The masters believed interpreters should understand every curse and thread in every tongue." "And yet you maintain such composure," I observed. "Most would be broken by such treatment." "Many were," she said simply. "I survived." We continued talking, and gradually, her responses grew longer. She also became bold enough to ask me questions, which soon became more direct. She asked about Westeros, King's Landing, and my conquest of the Iron Throne. I answered honestly, describing the city's stench and splendor in equal measure. "And your wives?" she asked. "News is you married 2 women." "Yes, Lady Margaery Tyrell and Lady Sansa Stark. Both are beautiful and ambitious in their own ways," I replied. "Sansa is sweeter, more earnest. Margaery, she reminds me a bit of you, actually. Clever enough to hide her cleverness when needed." Missandei smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. To be compared to a queen, even if she hadn't taken the title, must be a great honor. Then her expression grew serious. "Look, I'm really grateful to you for saving him. Grey Worm, I mean. Oh, a lover of Unsullied. As I guessed, you're really interesting," I said, watching her cheeks darken. "The reason I accepted your offer to share tea is because you saved him. And from this talk, I have a better idea of you compared to the rumors. The rumors don't talk about you this way, Your Grace. So, I want to ask this just in case." Her eyes met mine. "Do you plan to hurt my queen? What are you here for, really?" My eyes narrowed as I set down my cup. The room's temperature seemed to drop as I fixed her with a cold stare. "You've served her for less than a year, my dear. I've taken care of her for 18 years. I've bled for her, I've gotten beaten for her as I stole one more apple to feed her through the night. It's insulting you just asked me that. I've sold my mother's crown, the last thing we had of her, so Daenerys could eat for another month. And make no mistake, I myself would have rather starved to death instead. I've carried her across the free cities on my back when she was too weak to walk. I've whispered stories of home to her when nightmares woke her screaming." Missandei froze, swallowing visibly as I continued. "Who do you think you are to question my intentions toward my sister, the blood of my blood, the last of the dragons who'd help me return the Targaryen dynasty to its peak? You, who know nothing of our suffering, our exile, our birthright." She immediately bowed her head, her hands trembling slightly. Forgive me, Your Grace." I spoke out of turn. "I didn't mean to, I leaned back in my chair and sighed, shaking my head. "I'll ignore the disrespect this time since it's natural to doubt me given my recent actions toward her, and also because I know you're just worried about her." She took a deep breath, then whispered, "Thank you. If I can, I'll help you reconcile with her. It would make me happy to see the Khaleesi reunite with her family. She's someone I respect, but I admit that she can be incredibly stubborn at times. I think she's making a mistake by pushing you away. That made me smile. Perhaps my sister had found better companions than I'd initially thought. Thank you, I might need it. I rose from my seat, ready to face my sister again. Anyhow, Sir Barristan must have received his treatment by now. Let us go. This time, with news I suspected would change everything. Missandei and I walked through the corridors of the Great Pyramid, our footsteps soft against stone walls adorned with ancient carvings. Servants and guards shrank back as we passed, pressing themselves against the walls to avoid my path. Grey Worm's injuries were severe, Missandei said quietly. I'm not sure when he'd wake up. I nodded, feeling sympathy for her concern. The Unsullied are strong. He'll survive. We approached Daenerys's chambers, voices drifting through the partially open door. Missandei hesitated before knocking softly, then pushed the door open without waiting for a response. The sick room smelled of herbs and blood. Grey Worm lay motionless on one bed, his breathing shallow but steady. Missandei immediately moved to his side, her fingers hovering above his bandaged chest. Sir Barristan occupied the other bed, propped up against pillows. His face was pale beneath a network of fresh cuts, but his eyes were clear and focused as he spoke. Daenerys stood at the foot of his bed, her splinted arm held close to her body. Ser Jorah loomed protectively behind her, while Tyrion perched on a stool nearby, his mismatched eyes watching everything. Came out of nowhere, Barristan was saying as we entered. At least 20 of them, wearing those golden masks. They had us surrounded before we could call for help. 23, to be exact, I said. All eyes turned to me as I stepped into the chamber. Daenerys's face hardened, but she said nothing. Sir Barristan, I acknowledged with a respectful nod. The old knight returned my nod. Prince, as I was saying, they had us surrounded in that narrow alley. Grey Worm took down 6 before they overwhelmed him. I managed to hold my position at his back, but there were too many. He touched a bandage on his forearm. I was starting to falter when Prince Viserys arrived. How convenient, Jorah muttered. I shot him a cold look. Call it divine intervention if you must, Mormont. I was in the area. I heard the commotion, and yes, my ears pick up a lot more than normal humans. And decided to help, Tyrion asked, his tone skeptical. How charitable of you, considering your earlier introduction to your sister. I respect Sir Barristan, I answered simply. Even when his choice in employers is questionable. And Lord Tyrion, I think you have the wrong idea. I don't want to ruin Daenerys and her little army. Once she joins me, it'll be my army, after all. Dany glared at me, about to say something, but Barristan coughed and continued. He saved our lives, your grace, he said to Dany. He cut through those assassins like they were made of parchment. I've never seen such skill in all my years. Daenerys frowned. And then, I carried them here, I interjected. Or did you miss my dramatic entrance through your window? Dragons don't use staircases. Getting back to what matters, Daenerys said sharply, not even sparing me a glance. What did you discover before the attack? Where is my nephew? The chamber fell silent. Barristan's weathered face grew grim as he exchanged a look with Grey Worm's. Unconscious form. Your Grace, he began slowly, when we reached Aegon's quarters, they had been abandoned. There were signs of hasty packing. Most of his possessions were gone. Tyrion leaned forward. Gone, as in fled. Barristan nodded. Yes, but that's not all. He took a deep breath. I went to the holding area for the dragons. Rhaegal, he closed his eyes briefly. The chains were broken. Rhaegal is gone. What? Daenerys whispered, her face draining of color. He took Rhaegal, Barristan confirmed. Young Griff, or Aegon, if that's who he truly is, freed your dragon and fled with him. We need to question the city guards for a better report, but I'm confident that is what happened. If he's just taking a stroll with Rhaegal instead, he should have reported to us earlier. And his commanders would still be in the city. Daenerys swayed on her feet. No. That's impossible. Rhaegal wouldn't what? Except a rider with Targaryen blood, I interjected. Even if it's bastard blood, it's still the blood of dragon riders. Aegon is my nephew, she insisted, though her voice trembled. Why would he betray me? Ser Jorah moved to her side, catching her arm as her knees seemed to give way. Khaleesi, he murmured, steadying her. I couldn't contain myself any longer. The laughter burst from me, wild and uncontrolled, bouncing off the stone walls of the chamber. Everyone turned to stare as I doubled over, clutching my sides. "This is too perfect," I gasped between peals of laughter. "The mother of dragons, betrayed by her own blood. Well, fake blood, that is. Get out," Daenerys shouted, her face contorted with rage and pain. "Get out now." My laughter died instantly, replaced by a cold fury that swept through me like wildfire. "You useless bitch," I snarled, stepping toward her. "You lost a dragon, and you dare shout at your brother's face." She flinched back, her eyes widening. "Only 3 dragons exist in this world, and you just lost one to a thief. Are you out of your mind?" My voice rose with each word, echoing off the chamber walls. Ser Jorah moved to stand between us. "That's enough. Step aside, you disgraced knight, before I remove your head from your shoulders," I snapped, not even bothering to look at him. My eyes remained fixed on my sister. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Any concept of the power you've just handed to an imposter?" I trusted him," she shot back, regaining some composure. "He had Targaryen blood," the dragons responded to him. "Blackfire blood, I just told you," I corrected. "It carries just enough of our lineage to confuse a dragon. And now he has one of the 3 living weapons of war in the world. Your stupidity is truly impressive, sister." Daenerys lifted her chin. "Why do you care? They're my dragons anyway, not yours. Besides, aren't you the same as him? You stole one of my eggs. And I awakened it into a greater dragon than yours," I replied coldly. "I'm sure he'll do the same. He'll make a stronger dragon out of Rhaegal. Then he'll come back and take Drogon away too. I don't think Drogon will even fight back. He knows how weak and pathetic you are, that's why he fled. He'll happily accept this fake Aegon as his new master." Her face paled further with each word, fury and fear battling in her eyes. With a sudden motion, she grabbed a flower vase from beside Barristan's bed and hurled it at my head. I batted it aside with a casual swipe of my arm, sending it shattering against the wall. Water and petals sprayed across the floor as I fixed her with a withering glare. "You're alone right now, Dany. One of your dragons is flying who knows where, while the other has been stolen. I wonder how long you can hold Meereen. How long until the slaves are chained again? How long until they spit at the name of Mizza?" "I'll find him," she insisted. "I'll get Rhaegal back." "No, you won't," I said, moving toward the open window. "You'll stay here in your little pyramid, playing at being queen while your power slips through your fingers like sand." Where are you going?" I burst out laughing once again. "What, are you getting your hopes up? That your strong, reliable brother is going to retrieve your stolen dragon?" I locked eyes with her. "Nah, I don't care. Didn't you say it's your dragon? Go find it yourself, bitch. I only care for dragons belonging to House Targaryen." She glared at me as I climbed onto the windowsill, looking back at her shocked face one last time. "Remember this moment, sister. Remember who tried to warn you. Remember what you are without me by your side." Dany trembled on her spot, her eyes wet. I ignored the stares of everyone else as I leapt out into the open air, my wings unfurling as I plummeted toward the city below. Chapter 96, Stubbornness Brings Suffering. The window stood empty, a cruel rectangle of blue sky where Viserys had disappeared moments before. Daenerys stared at it, her broken arm throbbing in time with her heartbeat. The wind stirred the curtains, bringing with it the distant sounds of the city below, a city that had no idea their queen had just lost one of her most powerful weapons. "Your Grace," Ser Jorah's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Shall I send riders to track?" "Leave me," she whispered, not turning around. When no one moved, she whirled to face them, her voice cracking like a whip. "Leave me." Barristan shifted uncomfortably in his bed. Tyrion's mismatched eyes studied her with uncomfortable perception. Jorah looked as if he might argue, but something in her face must have stopped him. One by one, they filed out of the chamber. Only Missandei remained, standing quietly near the door. "You too," Daenerys said, softer now. The translator shook her head. "I'll stay, Your Grace." Daenerys didn't have the strength to argue. As soon as the door closed behind the others, she stumbled to her own chamber, Missandei following like a shadow. Her legs gave way once inside, and she sank to the edge of her bed. "Have the doors guarded," Daenerys commanded. "No one enters without my express permission." Missandei nodded and slipped out, returning moments later to find Daenerys staring at her hand, her good hand, the one not mangled by her brother. "He was right," Daenerys whispered. "I've lost 2 dragons, 2 out of 3 in the world. While my brother, He. Drogon will return, your grace. In Rhaegal is gone. The words tore from her throat, raw and painful. Gone with a man I believed was my blood. A man I welcomed, trusted. She drove her fist into the silk bedcover. And Viserys knew. He knew all along, and I wouldn't listen. Missandei sat beside her cautiously. Your brother is different now. Changed. You couldn't have known what he'd become. It's understandable you didn't trust him. No, he's exactly what he always wanted to be, powerful. Strong. A bitter laugh escaped her. And I'm exactly what he always said I was. Weak. Stupid. Useless. The tears came then, hot and sudden. Daenerys tried to hold them back, but they spilled down her cheeks in streams, her shoulders shaking with the force of her sobs. Missandei reached for her, and Daenerys collapsed against her shoulder, weeping like she hadn't since she was a child. I've lost everything, she gasped between sobs. My husband, my son, 2 dragons, the Iron Throne is farther away than ever. You have not lost everything, Missandei insisted, her voice gentle but firm. You have Drogon, he flies by every now and then, and you know it. You have your Unsullied, you have your freedmen who love you. For how long? My brother was right about that too. How long before they turn on me? How long before the other city's masters come? I can't even control my own dragons anymore. Perhaps, Missandei ventured cautiously, you should consider what your brother said. About working together, no. Daenerys pulled away, wiping her tears. He'd never allow it, not as equals. He'd want me to submit, to kneel. I am a dragon, as much as he is. Dragons don't kneel. A soft knock interrupted them. Daenerys quickly dried her face with the edge of her sleeve. Who is it? The imp, came Tyrion's voice. A moment of your time, your grace. Dany felt annoyed at the prospect of talking with someone else, but when she looked at Missandei, she nodded encouragingly. Enter, she called. Tyrion stepped in, closing the door behind him. His eyes took in her reddened face, but he made no comment on it. Instead, he poured himself a cup of wine from the carafe on her table and took a long drink. Your brother has quite the temper, he observed. Must run in the family. If you've come to mock me, I've come to offer counsel, Tyrion corrected. The kind you may not wish to hear, but need to all the same. She regarded him warily. Speak, then. You lost a dragon, and your other one is in his rebellious phase, he said plainly and without accusation. The only way to recover from this is to make a move before the world realizes how vulnerable you are. And perhaps, he hesitated, make amends with your brother. Never, she spat, even if you're unaware of what he did in the past, you saw how he broke my arm. He insulted me in front of my advisors. Yes, and he saved your Lord Commander and Captain from certain death, Tyrion countered. People are complicated, your grace. I should know, my family wrote the book on complicated. Daenerys stood up, pacing the chamber. Her mind raced with possibilities, with fears, with plans. What else do you suggest other than crawling back to Viserys? Tyrion sighed. Well, if you don't want to reconcile with him, then, strength. Show it immediately. Make decisions that prove you're still in control. News that Rhaegal is gone will spread throughout the city soon since the Golden Company will slowly leave. The Golden Company would leave, and they'd be able to do nothing to stop them. Something hardened inside her at his words. A resolve, cold and sharp as Valyrian steel. Missandei, she said, turning to face them both. Send word to Hizdar zo Loraq. Our marriage will take place as soon as possible. 3 days from now. Missandei's eyes widened slightly. So soon, your grace. Yes, and with it, we will reopen the fighting pits. Let him have his bloody games. Her voice dropped, becoming steelier with each word. And summon the other captains of the Unsullied, the commanders of the freedmen. Meereen must prepare for war. War, Tyrion asked carefully. Against whom? Daenerys looked back at the empty window, where the sky seemed to mock her now. Against anyone who threatens what is mine. If I cannot trust my own blood, then I will build an empire without them. And Aegon, young Griff? Tyrion asked. What of him? He is my enemy now, she said, her voice flat and cold. Just like Viserys, anyone who steals from me, who betrays me, is my enemy. And I will take back what is mine with fire and blood. She turned away from the window, her tears now dried by the heat of her rekindled purpose. The dragon has 3 heads, they say. But this dragon stands alone. I lay sprawled across silken sheets, enjoying the warmth of 2 naked bodies pressed against mine. Lady Nareen Zogazine's curves had already become familiar to me over the past few days, her olive skin a pleasant contrast to the paler complexion of her cousin Saria. The younger woman had joined us last night at Nareen's suggestion, though I suspected it was more to keep me interested than any genuine desire to share. More wine, my king. Nareen purred, reaching for the crystal decanter. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, tickling my chest as she leaned across me. Not yet, I replied, watching Saria pluck another grape from the silver bowl. She placed it between my lips with delicate fingers, her eyes never leaving mine. I'd met Nareen during my initial exploration of Meereen, when I'd heard her cursing my sister's name in that heated exchange with a merchant. Her hatred for the self-styled queen had drawn me to her, and after I'd dispatched those sons of the harpy in her bedroom, she'd taken to treating me like some conquering hero. Saria was different. It had been Nareen's idea to introduce me to her cousin, younger, more flexible, she'd whispered in my ear, and yet not bothering to hide the competitive edge in her voice. When I probed her for more, the truth surfaced. It turned out that she owed Saria a favor, and when she was bragging about the Westerosi night in her bedroom, Saria begged to see him. Only later did she tell her my identity, having received my permission. You should have seen her face when I told her who you were, Nareen said now, trailing her fingers down my chest. She didn't believe me at first. And now, I asked, turning to Saria. The younger woman blushed. Now I believe everything, she said, her accent thicker than her cousin's. The wings, the strength. Is that all you believe? I teased, pulling her closer. Nareen's face tightened just enough to notice. The jealousy was amusing, as if either of them meant anything more to me than momentary entertainment. Still, I enjoyed the rivalry. Two noble ladies of Meereen competing for my attention while their city slowly crumbled around them. Oh, I believe everything about you, your grace, she brushed her lips against mine. Right then, Nareen blinked and blurted suddenly, oh, by the way, did you hear? Your sister announced her marriage to Hisdar zo Loraq. 3 days from now, looks like there's going to be a feast. I raised an eyebrow, noticing a frown from Saria, who seemed annoyed at her cousin's interruption. She's also reopening the fighting pits, Saria added, clearly not wanting to be outdone in providing information. The wedding will begin after the fighting matches. Everyone's talking about it. It confuses me why she's marrying a Meereen's man, though. Why, it's obvious. I couldn't help it. Laughter burst from my chest, loud and unrestrained. Both women jumped slightly at the sound. My sweet, stupid little sister, I said, wiping away a tear of mirth. So predictable. You don't seem worried, Nareen observed, her head tilted in curiosity. I thought you Targaryens cared about keeping the bloodline pure or whatever. I sat up, leaning against the ornate headboard. Why would I be worried? She's flailing like a drowning rat. No dragon, no real allies, just a city that hates her and a marriage to a man who probably dreams of slitting her throat. And if you think I'd let her husband, whoever it might be, touch her, you couldn't be more wrong. My laughter subsided as I thought about it more. Dany had always been stubborn, even as a child. I remembered how she'd refuse to eat certain foods, no matter how hungry she was. How she'd insist on carrying her own small pack when we traveled, even when it made her shoulders ache, and now that stubborn streak would be her undoing. She could have just asked, I sighed in my head. One simple, help me, brother, and I would have dealt with the sons of the harpy. I would have helped her keep her dragons in check. I would have taught her what it means to rule. Instead, she clung to her pride, her illusions of independence. Even with one arm broken and one dragon gone, she wouldn't bend. Wouldn't acknowledge my superiority. Well, I continued, accepting a goblet of wine from Nareen, she made her choice. She chose that Meereenese puppet over my protection. She wants to play at being queen over this tiny city rather than ruling Westeros beside me. I drained the wine, feeling its warmth spread through me. The thought of Daenerys struggling to maintain control of Meereen while married to a man who represented everything she claimed to stand against, it filled me with a perverse satisfaction. Let her see how far her dragons and slaves take her, I muttered. Nareen stroked my cheek, bringing me back to the present. You seem angry, my king. Not angry, I corrected, setting down the empty goblet. Just disappointed. She's the last of my blood, and she's too stupid to save herself. Perhaps after the wedding, when she sees her mistake, Saria began. Stop talking about that, ladies, I said firmly, cutting her off. Both women immediately fell silent, their eyes lowering. Get dressed. I'll take you two to eat today. To eat, Nareen repeated, her voice confused. But we have food here. I want to see the city, I explained, already rising from the bed. I want to see how it prepares for my sister's grand gesture of surrender. Feel the mood in the streets. The women exchanged glances before hurrying to comply. They pulled silken robes around their naked forms and disappeared to their respective dressing rooms. I stood by the window, looking out over Meereen's sprawling landscape, the Great Pyramid dominating the skyline. Somewhere in that pyramid, Daenerys was planning her wedding, thinking she'd found a solution to her problems. She had no idea how deeply the rot had set in, how many enemies surrounded her. And I would watch it all unfold, savoring each moment of her downfall until she had no choice but to crawl to me for help. The fighting pits would reopen in 3 days. Then the wedding would take place. And I would be there to witness it all, to watch my sister's face as she realized too late that she had made the wrong choice. Until then, I would enjoy Meereen's pleasures. Its food, its women, its luxuries. I would drink in the city's beauty and decay in equal measure, knowing that soon enough, chaos would consume it all. And my sister with it. Ah, and by the way, I turned to Saria, who was almost done getting dressed. Don't do anything stupid that'll get you killed. Saria, the spy, flinched in response. Chapter 97, The Great Fighting Pits. Hisdar zo Loraq adjusted the golden collar of his outfit, admiring how the emerald embroidery caught the morning light. The mirror reflected a man of consequence, soon to be more than just a noble of Meereen, but its king in all but name. His fingers traced the intricate patterns sewn into the fabric, patterns that had adorned the robes of Meereen's greatest rulers for centuries. Patterns that would soon be his by right. The Dragon Queen had finally bent. Not to fire and blood, but to political necessity. Hisdar couldn't suppress the smirk that spread across his face. After all those meetings, all those careful suggestions and orchestrated pressures, she had agreed to marry him. And she doesn't suspect a thing. He reached for the oils on his dressing table, dabbing scent behind his ears. The perfume of Karth, expensive, exotic, and impossible to obtain since the Dragon Queen's little tantrum in that city. Yet he had his ways. He always had his ways. Once we are wed, he murmured to his reflection, she'll learn how Meereen truly functions. The foreign queen with her foreign ideas would soon find herself isolated. The Unsullied were formidable, yes, but they didn't understand politics. They didn't understand Meereen. She had freed the slaves but failed to grasp that power in Slaver's Bay wasn't built on freedom. His father had died when the queen took the city. A tragedy, certainly, but now Hisdar would restore everything, and more. Not just Meereen would be his, but all of Slaver's Bay. The Sons of the Harpy, although an annoyance, indirectly benefited him. I'll have to eradicate them after coming to power. Otherwise they'll pose a danger to me, too. He slid a golden ring onto his finger, his father's ring, the symbol of their house. How strange that after such devastating losses, fortune had turned in his favor so dramatically. The queen needed a Meereenese husband to placate the city. She needed him. He couldn't help but chuckle. And after today's spectacle, after our marriage is sealed before the old gods and new, I'll show her what it truly means to wake the dragon. Hisdar straightened his outfit one final time, the silk whispering against his skin. The fighting pits awaited. His future queen awaited. With a satisfied nod to his reflection, he turned and left the chamber, his steps measured and confident as he made his way toward Daznak's pit. Daenerys sat rigidly on the raised dais, the hot Meereenese sun beating down mercilessly upon her as cheers erupted around the fighting pit. Her splintered arm rested uncomfortably at her side, a constant reminder of Viserys' cruelty. Beside her, Hisdar zo Loraq, her husband in mere hours, leaned forward eagerly, his eyes fixed on the bloodshed below. 2 former slaves circled each other on the blood-soaked sand, their bodies glistening with sweat, muscles tensed as they searched for openings in each other's defenses. The larger man lunged, his sword glinting in the sunlight. The smaller fighter spun away, his movements fluid and precise. You see how he moves. Hisdar gestured excitedly. That's Osnik Vo-Haz's former slave. Trained in the Bravo Sea water dance, quite rare in these parts. Daenerys kept her face carefully neutral. Does he have a name, or just his former masters? Well, Hisdar faltered, then recovered. They call him the Storm. Though I don't recall his birth name. How convenient, she murmured. Hisdar shifted uncomfortably. My queen, you must understand, these men fight for glory now, not because they're forced. They've chosen this path, have they? Daenerys turned cold eyes on him. Or have they simply exchanged one form of slavery for another? Tell me, husband, what other skills were they taught besides killing? Before Hizdahr could answer, Ser Barristan leaned down slightly from his position behind her. The small one knows what he's doing. See how he keeps his enemy moving, tiring him out. I've seen better footwork from Dothraki children, Ser Jorah added dryly, drawing a rare smile from Daenerys. Hizdahr frowned at the interruption. The larger fighter is Grazdin Mo Ulher's champion. He's going to win. 3 years undefeated in the lesser pits. Until today, Ser Barristan predicted confidently. You're quite certain, Hizdahr said. Care to wager on it? I've never needed gold to know when a man is outmatched, Barristan replied. Below, the crowd roared as the smaller fighter drew first blood, a quick slash across his opponent's thigh. Daenerys tried not to flinch at the sight of the crimson spray. Marvelous, isn't it? Hizdahr leaned in close, eyes glinting with excitement as the fighters clashed again, steel ringing against steel. The crowd screamed, their faces twisted in primal pleasure. Barbaric, Daenerys responded sharply, her voice strained. Tyrion, seated a short distance away, met her eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the spectacle just like her. He raised his cup in a mock toast, his expression sympathetic. Missandei stood nearby, her face carefully composed, though Daenerys could see the tension in her shoulders. My queen, Hizdahr persisted, these games bond the people. They unite former masters and former slaves alike in a shared spectacle. For centuries, the fighting pits have been, spare me the history lesson, Hizdahr, Daenerys cut him off. I've read enough of Meereen's bloody past to last a lifetime. Hizdahr sighed. This marriage was meant to bring peace. How can we achieve that if you dismiss our traditions so easily? What do you mean, dismiss? I am allowing this fight, am I not? She replied, watching as the smaller fighter executed a complex maneuver, narrowly avoiding his opponent's blade. But peace through bloodshed seems a strange concept. Yet you conquered this city through bloodshed, Hizdahr observed quietly. Daenerys felt heat rise to her cheeks. To end slavery, not to watch men slaughter each other for entertainment. The fighting pits have always been sacred. She scoffed. There's nothing sacred about death for sport. Ser Jorah spoke without taking his eyes off the fighters. The smaller one is about to win. He's drawing the big one in. Nonsense, Hizdahr protested. Grazdin's man has the reach and the strength. Look at those arms. Strength means little against speed, Ser Barristan commented. Watch. As if on cue, the smaller fighter feinted left, then spun right with astonishing speed. His blade found the gap beneath the larger man's arm. The crowd gasped collectively as the champion staggered, blood pouring from the wound. The smaller man darted back, waiting. Finish him, someone in the crowd shouted. Others took up the call, a rhythmic chant that made Daenerys' stomach turn. You see, Hizdahr gestured enthusiastically, this is what they live for. The moment when life and death hang in the balance. When the gods themselves seem to watch and decide. I see men turning death into a game, Daenerys replied coldly. I see a city that hasn't learned the value of life. Hizdahr opened his mouth to respond, but something in the air changed. A whisper of unease spread through the arena like ripples in water. Daenerys turned sharply, scanning the stands. Gold masks glinted ominously, scattered amidst the crowd. Sons of the Harpy, protect the queen, Ser Barristan barked sharply, drawing his sword with a smooth, practiced motion. Jorah instantly mirrored him, forming a barrier around Daenerys. Hizdahr froze, eyes wide in shock as the arena erupted in chaos. What is happening? Hizdahr sputtered, rising to his feet. Guards, where are the... A golden mask appeared behind him, a curved blade flashing in the sunlight. Before Daenerys could cry out a warning, the dagger plunged into Hizdahr's back. Her soon-to-be husband's eyes widened in shock, his mouth forming a perfect O of surprise as he crumpled to the ground. The sons of the Harpy surged forth, their curved daggers flashing murderously. Unsullied warriors rushed to meet them, spears clashing, but the Harpies were numerous and ruthless. Blood painted the sand as warriors and rebels fell alike. Come, Khaleesi, Jorah urged, grabbing Daenerys' good arm. She stumbled to her feet, heart pounding in her chest, eyes wide at the carnage unfolding around her. Missandei cried out as a Harpy grabbed her hair, yanking her backward. Missandei. Daenerys reached for her friend, but Barristan pulled her away. Grey Worm, Barristan shouted. The unsullied commander appeared, still weak from his previous injuries but moving with determination. He drove his spear through the Harpy attacking Missandei, but not before the masked assassin's blade opened a deep gash across her shoulder. "This way," Barristan shouted, cutting down a harpy who lunged. From the stands, Daenerys felt numb as she was pulled along between the two knights, screams and steel ringing in her ears. She saw Tyrion duck beneath a bench, narrowly avoiding a dagger thrust, and scramble to stay alive amid the madness. A moment later, a harpy caught him across the cheek with a glancing blow, blood streaming down his face. "They're everywhere," Daenerys gasped, the enormity of the betrayal crushing her. "Hizdar, he's dead, forget him," Barristan shouted back fiercely. "We must get you to safety." A harpy leapt from above, landing on Ser Barristan's shoulders. The old knight staggered but kept his footing, reaching back to grasp his attacker. The harpy's dagger found Barristan's side, slipping between the plates of his armor. Barristan roared in pain but managed to throw the assassin off, dispatching him with a quick thrust. "Ser Barristan," Daenerys cried, seeing the blood blooming across his white cloak. "It's nothing, your grace," he gritted out, though his face had gone pale. Jorah fought like a man possessed, his sword carving through the attackers, but even he couldn't hold them all back. A dagger caught him across the forearm, opening a deep gash. He barely seemed to notice, pushing Daenerys behind him as more harpies approached. But there was no safety to be found. The harpies surrounded them on all sides, blocking every exit. How were there so many harpies? Unsullied bodies lay crumpled around them, the strength of her loyal warriors faltering beneath the relentless assault. Daenerys closed her eyes briefly, knowing her end was near. Then, roared. A roar split the air, primal and deafening, shaking the very foundations of the arena. "Drogon," she whispered, hope surging through her veins. The black dragon appeared in a storm of fire and fury, descending from the heavens with wings outstretched and scales shimmering with power. Flames erupted from his jaws, searing the sons of the harpy to death and scattering them like frightened vermin. Perhaps all hope was not lost. Screams of terror replaced those of triumph as Drogon landed heavily, the earth trembling beneath his massive form. For a moment, Daenerys felt relief wash over her. Drogon had come to her in her time of need. Her child remembered her, he was here to protect her. But the feeling didn't last. A brave, or foolish, harpy charged forward, a long spear clutched in his hands. Before anyone could react, he thrust it upward with all his might. The spearhead sank deep into Drogon's flank, drawing a roar of pain that made the very stones of the arena vibrate. "No," Daenerys screamed, her heart twisting at the sight of her child's pain. Drogon thrashed, his tail smashing through stone seats, his jaws snapping at the air as he tried to reach the spear embedded in his flesh. More attackers surged forward, encouraged by the sight of the wounded dragon. Drogon shot flames at them, burning tens, but a dozen more followed. Ropes sailed through the air, looping around Drogon's legs and neck. The dragon struggled against the bindings, but each movement seemed to cause him greater pain. "Khaleesi, stay away from Drogon, it's dangerous," Jorah urged, pulling her away from the dragon. Daenerys hesitated only a moment, meeting the loyal gaze of Barristan and Jorah before she moved. "No, come with me. We must protect Drogon," she called desperately. Barristan hesitated before nodding. He realized the value of her last dragon. "All right, we will hold them. Go to Drogon," Barristan shouted, cutting down another attacker. Her vision blurred with tears as she watched Drogon strain against the ropes, his mighty body trembling with effort and pain. Her chest felt tight, each breath a labor as she witnessed her child's suffering. She was failing everyone who had believed in her. More spears came flying, filling Drogon with holes as he screamed in pain. It hurt Dany, it made her heart splinter like glass. At this rate Drogon will die. Her baby. Roarg. And then, a different cry pierced the air, deeper, sharper, louder, and no less powerful. A golden light brightened the midday sun, drawing all eyes upward. Releasing a screech more powerful than Drogon, Viserion landed, her golden scales bright as she breathed out flames that burned through the ropes restraining Drogon. People threw spears at her too, but they simply bounced off her gleaming golden scales like twigs against stone. Viserion lifted her majestic head, golden eyes narrowing into slits, and seemed to grin mockingly at the foolish humans below. "Pathetic humans, dare to hurt my blood." Viserion positioned herself protectively over Drogon, her wings flared out like a shimmering golden shield. The dragon's voice was something Daenerys had never heard before, a deep, guttural rumble that somehow formed recognizable words, sending shivers down the spines of every survivor. With a quick, brutal motion, Viserion whipped her tail forward, slicing right through several sons of the harpy like they were made of paper. Blood splashed everywhere, soaking the sand a deep, ugly red. The dragon lunged ahead, crushing attackers beneath her huge claws, their bones snapping loudly beneath her weight. One brave, or maybe foolish, harpy charged at her with his spear, stabbing desperately at Viserys's chest, but the weapon just shattered against her thick scales. She tilted her head a bit, almost amused by his guts, or stupidity, before casually smashing his skull with one heavy stomp of her massive claw. Viserys's magnificent wings spread wide, slicing gracefully through the air like enormous golden blades, leaving destruction in their wake. The ground quickly became a chaotic scene sprinkled with remnants of battle. Just as another group of attackers surged toward her, a fierce burst of dragonfire erupted from Drogon, turning them to ash and melting their armor in an instant. But more enemies kept coming, refusing to abandon their futile charge. Viserys spun around sharply, her massive wings whipping up gusts strong enough to hurl men against the arena walls, their bones breaking upon impact. Her jaws snapped shut, catching two attackers midair, tearing them to shreds before flinging their mangled bodies back into the chaos, sheeing. A sharp, blade-like sound spread through the arena, as a new pair of wings cut through the air at a terrible speed. Dany looked up to find Viserys reaching the skies of the arena from wherever he'd been all this time. Her heart skipped a beat as he gilded downward, his wings casting a dark shadow over the battlefield. Arrows aimed at him were swatted away as if they were mere pests, still floating a dozen feet above the ground. For a brief moment, he hovered silently, casting a cold gaze upon the devastation below. Then, Viserys, he ordered calmly, his voice full of authority. Gold dragon's breath. At his words, Viserys' throat expanded as molten fire built up inside her. It wasn't anything like Drogon's, no. Dany's eyes widened as the flames exploded outward in a controlled, blazing stream. Unlike normal dragonfire, this golden flame twisted and turned as if alive, washing over the sons of the harpy and burning them up in an instant. The whole fighting pit turned into a fiery nightmare, yet somehow, Daenerys and her people remained untouched amid the destruction. She stared in disbelief at her brother's power, at the control he exerted over his dragon. How had he achieved such mastery? How had Viserys grown so powerful? The fight was destined to continue. Viserys was here, her brother, coming to her rescue. Despite everything, the sons of Harpy didn't stand a chance. But Daenerys couldn't stay. Shame and failure washed over her like a tide. Her city was in chaos, another of her husbands dead, her friends wounded, and her own dragon injured because of her decisions. With sudden, desperate determination, she swiftly climbed atop Drogon's broad back, ignoring the pain radiating from her injured arm. She clung to his scales as he roared again, his wings spreading wide. "Go," she begged, "fly." With a powerful thrust, Drogon surged upward, leaving chaos and death behind. The wind tore at her hair, the city shrinking rapidly beneath them. Daenerys looked down, heart aching for those left behind, but she didn't have the courage to show her face to these people anymore. Viserys turned his head and her eyes met his. She was scared he'd give her a mocking look, but his expression, it was full of rage. But not toward her. And no, I must be seeing things. Whatever the case, she didn't want to spend another minute here. She had failed them, failed as a queen, failed as a ruler, failed as a Targaryen. And now, as she fled on Drogon's back, she could not escape the truth that her brother, the brother she had dismissed and defied, had come to save what remained of her broken kingdom. Chapter 98, Fire and Blood. The dry grass of the Dothraki sea whispered beneath Daenerys as she curled into herself, the midday sun bearing down with merciless heat. Her broken arm throbbed in time with her heartbeat, a constant reminder of her failure. Of her brother. Drogon lay sprawled nearby, his massive form casting the only shadow for miles. Blood still oozed from the wounds he'd suffered in Daznak's pit, spears embedded in his black scales like pins in a seamstress's cushion. She'd tried to remove them, but he'd snapped at her fingers, eyes blazing with pain and fury. "Please," she whispered, crawling closer despite his warning growl. "Let me help you." The dragon regarded her with amber eyes that held no recognition, no loyalty, just the wild, untamed spirit of a creature that answered to no master. Not even the mother of dragons. How had her brother tamed one such beast? Shame washed over her anew. She had abandoned her city, her people, her friends. Left Esser Barristan bleeding, Grey Worm barely recovered from his earlier wounds, Missandei with a fresh gash across her shoulder. They had fought for her, and she had fled. And Viserys. The memory of his face as she soared away twisted in her gut like a knife. He'd come for her after all, despite her defiance, despite her broken promises. His dragon, stronger, more magnificent than even Drogon, had moved with precision and power that Daenerys could only dream of commanding. The vast emptiness of the Dothraki sea mirrored Daenerys' sense of abandonment. Each breath felt like labor, weighed down by the heavy realization of her failures. Yet, amidst the whispers of the dry grass and Drogon's occasional pained growl, a spark of resolve ignited within her. She recalled the faces of those who had stood by her, the loyalty in Grey Worm's eyes, the unyielding determination of Esser Barristan, the gentle support of Missandei. They had fought for her, believed in her vision of a better world. A sudden wave of clarity washed over her. She couldn't abandon them now, not when they needed her most. They were more than just subjects, they were her family, her people. Since her dreams of getting the Iron Throne were ruined, the city of Meereen became more than a throne, it was a promise of freedom, a symbol of her dream to break the chains of oppression. She had to go back. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked Drogon, her voice cracking with thirst. She'd initially only wanted to fly into the pyramid, but Drogon brought her here. She leaned against his body, staring ahead as she spoke slowly. "Take me back. They need us." "Grura." Drogon flicked his tail, unconcerned with her pleas. She sighed, staring ahead. Spoiler: he had gorged himself on wild goats earlier, leaving nothing but charred bones for her to find. Now, his only interest seemed to be sleep. Daenerys sank back into the grass, her strength fading. Without water, without food, she wouldn't last long in this wasteland. Another failure to add to her growing list. "You should have listened." The voice slithered through the air like silk. Daenerys stiffened, then turned slowly. Quaithe the Shadowbender stood a few paces away, her lacquered mask gleaming in the sunlight. Her form shimmered as if seen through water. The Shadowbender's presence seemed both solid and ethereal, a contradiction of the natural world. "You," Daenerys breathed, struggling to her feet. "Have you come to mock me as well?" "I came to witness," Quaithe replied, her voice eerily calm. "To see the Dragon Queen fallen from her throne of bones." Fury flared in Daenerys' chest. "I have not fallen. Meereen still stands, and I will return." "Meereen burns," Quaithe interrupted. "The sons of the Harpy spread through its streets like poison. Your unsullied fall one by one. Your friends bleed. Your reign crumbles to ash." Each word struck like a physical blow. Daenerys swayed on her feet. "No," she whispered. "My brother." "Yes," Quaithe nodded slowly. "Your brother. The Dragon King. He fights your war now, while you hide in the grass. He's the sole reason that the things I just mentioned didn't happen. He defied that fate." I'm not hiding," Daenerys snapped, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. "Drogon brought me here. I didn't choose to leave." Quaithe tilted her head, the jewels on her mask catching the sunlight. "Didn't you? The moment you climbed onto his back, you chose flight over fight. You chose to abandon what you could not control." Drogon shifted behind her as if sensing her distress. But he made no move to rise, to take her back to the city that needed her. "What would you have me do?" Daenerys asked, anger giving way to desperation. "Tell me plainly for once. No more riddles, no more prophecies. I told you before, to go forward, you must go back." Quaithe stepped closer, her movements unnaturally smooth. "Back to the beginning, back to blood." "Viserys," Daenerys said, the name bitter on her tongue. "The brother you denied, the king you scorned." Quaithe's voice held no judgment, only cold facts. "He has grown into his power while you cling to the ghost of yours." Daenerys felt herself trembling, not from fear but from the weight of truth in those words. She thought of Viserys as he was now, commanding, powerful, his dragon obeying his every word while her own fled at the first opportunity. The contrast was so stark it burned. "He broke my arm," she said softly. "He threatened me, called me useless. And was he wrong?" Quaithe asked, the question slicing deep. "You have lost 2 dragons. Your city bleeds, your soldiers die, your enemies multiply." Daenerys had no answer. "The time for pride has passed, Daenerys Stormborn," Quaithe continued, circling her slowly. "The dragon must not fight the dragon. Fire against fire leaves only ashes. You want me to surrender to him?" Daenerys asked incredulously. "To kneel before my brother like some conquered queen. I want you to remember who you are." Quaithe stopped directly before her. "Blood of the dragon, last of the Targaryens, save one. You were meant to rule together, a dynasty reborn through fire. He's not here to conquer you, he's just here to take his sister back." Dany's heart spasmed at her last words. Does he truly? Despite everything, she let out a laugh, a hollow, bitter sound. You don't know my brother if you think he would share power. I know him better than you think, Quaithe said cryptically. He has changed, yes. Grown stronger, yes, but he came for you when you needed him most. Would a true enemy do such a thing? The question lingered in the air between them. Daenerys remembered the rage in Viserys' eyes as she fled, not directed at her, but at those who dared attack her. It didn't fit with the brother who had sold her, abused her, and threatened her unborn child. Who are you? That is not important, mother of dragons. Dany knew asking more was useless, so she sighed. What would you have me do? She asked again, quieter now. Submit, Quaithe said simply. Not to break, but to bend. Like the reed in the storm that survives while the oak shatters. Find him, join him, together, you will be unstoppable. Daenerys looked away, staring across the endless plains. And if I refuse, she was not convinced. She'd never be. Then you will die, Quaithe said, her voice soft with certainty. Alone, forgotten, and he will rule all the same. Lonely, but regardless. After that talk, the vision of Quaithe shimmered and vanished like morning mist, leaving Daenerys alone with the endless grasslands stretching in every direction. Then Drogon shifted restlessly beside her, his massive wings extending briefly before he launched himself skyward with surprising speed. Drogon, Daenerys cried, her voice breaking. Please don't leave me. But the black dragon soared higher, a dark shadow against the pale blue sky. It then banked sharply and disappeared beyond the horizon. Abandoned. Again. Her stomach clenched with hunger, her throat parched with thirst. Daenerys stumbled forward, her legs trembling beneath her. She couldn't simply sit there staring at the charred bones of sheep Drogon had devoured earlier. The tall grass lashed against her legs as she pressed on. With each step, her burden grew heavier, as her broken arms sent jolts of pain through her body with every motion. She scanned the terrain anxiously, looking for any hint of water, food, or shelter. Nothing. The grassland offered nothing. Other than endless waves of gold and brown under the merciless sun. It made her feel helpless. It made her want to cry. Submit, Quaithe had said. The word tasted like ashes in her mouth as her lips quivered. No, I am Daenerys Stormborn, she whispered to herself, her cracked lips stinging. I take what is mine with fire and blood. I do not submit. But hadn't she already fled, abandoned her people, left Meereen to burn while she cowered in the grass like a frightened rabbit? And Viserys, her cruel, weak brother who had sold her like chattel, now commanded a dragon more powerful than her own. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. As she spent the next hour roaming the grass in search of a single fruit-bearing tree, something finally changed. Doom, doom, doom. A distant sound pulled her from her thoughts. Drums. No, hoofbeats. Hundreds of them, perhaps 10,000, pounding against the earth in a rhythm as old as the grasslands themselves. Daenerys froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. One by one, riders appeared on the horizon, their silhouettes unmistakable. Long braids and curved araks gleaming in the sunlight. The Dothraki. Damn it, they saw her as an enemy, someone who was the reason why Khal Drogo died. This couldn't be good. They spread across the grassland like a living wave, horses snorting and stomping as they encircled her position. Thousands of them, far less than Drogo commanded, but more than enough to tear her apart. Their whoops and cries filled the air as they drew closer, tightening the noose around her. Daenerys swallowed. She stood straight, lifting her chin despite the fear coursing through her veins. She had been Khaleesi once. She would not cower before them, even in defeat. But as the circle of mounted warriors closed around her, the magnitude of her situation crashed down upon her shoulders. Alone, dragonless, injured, she was nothing but prey to them now. What could she do against 10,000 Dothraki? Daenerys sighed, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion and resignation. After everything she had survived, the Red Waste, Karth, the Masters of Astapor, and Yunkai, the Sons of the Harpy, to fall to Dothraki in the middle of nowhere seemed a cruel jest of the gods. Wasn't that funny? Somehow, she couldn't laugh. Roarg. Then, a roar split the sky. Not Drogon. She knew her child's voice, and this was different, deeper, more commanding. She knew this one too. A golden sheen fell over the world as if the sun itself had descended. Daenerys looked up to find Viserion soaring overhead, the dragon's golden scales catching the sunlight in a blinding display of power. She flew low as her massive form flew over the Dothraki, whose horses slowed and turned away in panic. Loyal steeds who would never fear battle now fled for their lives, though not all could escape. "Wah! Don't run, coward stallion," they yelled among themselves, and Dany looked around in wonder. It was a sight to see these brave men tremble. They looked at the dragon in fear, and they looked at her in fear, for the dragon was here to protect her. Viserion landed behind her with earth-shaking force, her wings creating a gust that nearly knocked Daenerys off her feet. The golden dragon roared at the Dothraki forces, the sound vibrating through Daenerys's bones. The air boomed, grass exploded. Barbaric mudbloods. And there, atop the magnificent creature, sat Viserys. Her brother, transformed beyond recognition from the sniveling, cruel man she had once known, glared at the Dothraki. Then, he looked down at her. He smiled at her, his expression shifting to triumph and something softer she couldn't quite name. "How many times do I have to save you in a single day, sister?" Not very dragon-like, he insulted her and then reached out a hand. "Come." Daenerys stared at the offered hand, paralyzed by indecision. To take it would mean surrender, an admission that she had failed where he had succeeded. That she couldn't survive without him. Every fiber of her being rebelled against the idea. Yet what choice did she truly have? Surrounded by Dothraki, without Drogon, with a broken arm, could she really afford pride now? If she refused him, what then? Would he leave her to the Khalasar? Fly away as Drogon had? Or would he take her anyway, drag her back to Meereen in chains to show everyone how the mighty mother of dragons had fallen? And if she accepted, what would he demand in return? Submission, the Iron Throne, her very dragons. But my dragons are already lost to me, she thought bitterly. Rhaegal stolen, Drogon fled, and Viserion. Viserion never belonged to me at all. Perhaps Quaithe was right. Perhaps this was the only way forward, through surrender. But, she wasn't sure if she had it in her too. Annoying to the last second. Before she could finish the thought, Viserys grumbled impatiently. He leapt from Viserion's back with inhuman grace, landing beside her. In one swift motion, he yanked her off her feet. "Look," he said, jumping back onto Viserion's back as if the massive height were nothing, cradling her against his chest, "if you're so stubborn, I'll just have to be a bit more forceful and claim you myself. I don't care if you keep fight." The words died in his throat as Daenerys wrapped her arms around his neck, gently resting her face against his shoulder. "No," she said softly, her voice barely audible over Viserion's breathing. "I won't fight anymore." She barely found the strength to speak. "I am sorry for being like this, brother." Viserys froze for a moment, clearly caught off guard by her surrender. A moment passed between them like that, surrounded by shouting Dothraki and a roaring Viserion. Then his expression softened into a genuine smile. He hugged her back, one arm secure around her waist. "Viserion, fly," he commanded. The golden dragon scoffed before spreading her wings and launching into the sky, leaving the thousands of Dothraki men on horseback far below. The sight made something click into place in Daenerys's mind. Her brother wasn't the same man who had sold her to Khal Drogo. The same man who had been bullied by every Dothraki, even the weakest among them. Now, he could simply ignore thousands of them together and walk away because they posed no threat to him. Because if they tried to harm him, she was sure the grass sea wouldn't belong to the Dothraki anymore. Dany felt pathetic at that realization. Knowing how lesser she was compared to him. As they soared higher, the acceptance of everything she had lost, and everything he had gained, washed over her in a wave of grief and acceptance. Yet, at the same time, she felt safe. Because lesser or not, he was her brother, and he came all the way here to protect her. Daenerys found herself sobbing against her brother's chest, tears she had held back for too long finally breaking free. Chapter 99, Realization in the Sky. The sun blazed overhead, casting shimmering patterns across Viserion's golden scales as we soared through the endless blue expanse. Clouds passed by us, lightening the day's toll on us. Far below, Slaver's Bay stretched like a dark sapphire, its waters hiding the horrors that had given the region its name. I held Daenerys firmly against my chest, one arm wrapped around her waist, the other gripping Viserion's spine ridges. Her silver-gold hair whipped across my face occasionally, carrying a scent that dragged me back to our childhood, before the madness, before the fall. She hadn't spoken a word since we left the Dothraki Sea. Her body remained tense against mine, though her arms had relaxed their death grip around my neck. Pride wounded, spirit broken, the mighty Khaleesi, the vaunted mother of dragons, reduced to being rescued by the only brother she'd once discarded. I felt her shallow breathing, the slight tremor that ran through her whenever Viserys banked sharply. Her broken arm lay awkwardly between us, a reminder of my own cruelty. I should have felt triumphant. Vindicated. Yet, strangely, victory was a mix. I did feel those two things I just mentioned, but it wasn't a 100% pleasant feeling. How things change, I mused, watching a flock of birds scatter at our approach. From a pathetic, silver-haired beggar to the Dragon King who commanded the skies. Once, I'd dreamed of nothing more than selling my sister for an army, scraping together enough power to take back what was stolen from us. My ambitions had been laughably small, 100,000 dumb barbaric screamers to conquer 7 kingdoms. Now, with the system's power flowing through my veins and Viserys at my command, those early dreams seemed like a child's fantasy. Page 1/3 Viserys Targaryen the Dragon King 23 years old level 5058 STR 60 END 57 DEX 62 INT 58 LUC 180 auth page 1/3 I observed the status screen. Level 50 now, and with a new draconic trait after the wings I received 25 levels ago. I was more than a mere human now. A lot more. I'd become something more, something stronger, deadlier, more cunning than I'd ever imagined possible. I'd secured alliances with houses Tyrell and Stark. I'd subjugated the Iron Islands. I'd defeated Stannis Baratheon and claimed King's Landing. I'd executed the false King Joffrey before his mother's eyes. I ruled the 7 kingdoms as its sole monarch. And yet, something had been missing, something I'd been reluctant to acknowledge. Her, my little sister, the last of my blood, the final piece of our shattered family. She was the only person in this world who remembered our mother's lullabies or could share stories of our childhood home, even if those memories were mere fragments for her. Sentiment, I scoffed inwardly. Weak, foolish, beneath me, but the truth remained. The reason I'd flown across the sea to come see her, ruling without Daenerys at my side, had felt incomplete. Not because I needed her power or her counsel, but because she was a Targaryen. The Targaryen other than me. Jon Snow didn't count, he was a bastard. And he wasn't my sibling. Dany and I were the last dragons, and dragons belong together. Viserys banked slightly, adjusting her course with the shifting winds. The world tilted beneath us, endless grasslands giving way to rolling hills, then more arid terrain as we neared the coastline again. Clouds drifted below us like islands in a sea of blue, casting scattered shadows on the land. I glanced down at Daenerys. Her eyes were half closed, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Her lips were cracked from dehydration, her skin flushed from the sun. She needed water, food, medical attention, all things I could provide once we reached civilization, but first. Viserys, I commanded, my voice carrying easily over the rush of wind, change course. To Yunkai. I felt Daenerys stiffen against me. Her eyes snapped fully open, looking up at me with confusion and alarm. Yunkai. She finally broke her silence, voice hoarse from disuse. Why, Meereen is where we need to go. My people are fighting there, dying, your people. I cut her off with a harsh laugh. The same people who were ready to skewer your dragon and watch you burn. The same city that spawned the sons of the Harpy. Viserys responded to my command, banking sharply eastward. The coastline appeared on the horizon, a thin line separating blue from brown. They're still my responsibility, Daenerys insisted, though with less conviction than before. I abandoned them once already. I can't what? I challenged. Can't make the right strategic decision. Can't put aside your pride long enough to listen to someone who knows better. Her eyes flashed with momentary defiance, a glimpse of the dragon still alive within her. Good. I hadn't come all this way to rescue a broken shell. Look, Dany, I continued, my tone softening slightly. I've already stabilized Meereen as much as possible. Your presence there isn't going to change anything. So just sit back for this, alright? We'll go to Yunkai and have a chat with the great masters. They are the real power behind the Sons of the Harpy. Her eyes narrowed, but I recognized the calculation behind them. My sister was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She understood strategy, even if her execution had been lacking. The wise masters, she murmured. I had my doubts, but, the same, I confirmed. They fund your enemies, arm them, direct them. And they sit untouched in their gilded pyramids, believing themselves beyond your reach. Below us, the landscape changed again. Green gave way to yellows and browns as we approached the coastline. Ships appeared as tiny specks on the water's surface, merchants and slavers plying their ancient trade routes, oblivious to the dragon passing overhead. "What do you intend to do?" Daenerys asked, her voice stronger now, curiosity overcoming her earlier meekness. I smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of power suffusing my veins. "What dragons do best, sister. Burn them all." As the words left my mouth, Viserion rumbled her approval, the vibration passing through her massive frame and into our bodies. For a moment, something of our childhood returned as our eyes locked, as we sank into the feeling that we were riding a dragon, a real dragon, flying across the sky. The way she'd once looked at me before I'd become bitter and cruel, before I'd sold her to Drogo. Before she'd grown into her own power and left me behind. It wasn't like those innocent days, too much had happened, too many wounds inflicted, but it was a step towards something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. She nodded slowly, her head resting against my shoulder once more. Not in defeat this time, but in something approaching understanding. If not trust, then at least acceptance. "The last time I was in Yunkai," she said quietly, "I freed the slaves and left. I thought it would last. I don't want to ridicule you, but freedom isn't as easy as you thought it was." "Freedom must be enforced, sister," I replied, watching the coastal cities begin to take shape in the distance. "And enforcement requires power." I tightened my grip on her waist slightly. Power the Dragon King now possesses. Her expression remained unreadable, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her uninjured hand came to rest lightly on mine, not quite an embrace, but not rejection either. The sky stretched endlessly around us, a canvas of deepening blue as afternoon wore toward evening. The air grew cooler at this height, though Viserion's natural heat kept us warm. Below, the world seemed small and insignificant, cities reduced to toy models, people to specks, problems to simple puzzles easily solved with fire and blood. Up here, with the last of my blood in my arms and a dragon beneath me, I understood the Targaryen words as never before. We weren't meant to crawl among the lesser beings, to beg or plead or negotiate. We were meant to rule from on high, to shape the world as we saw fit. Yunkai appeared on the horizon, its yellow walls catching the sunlight like a beacon. Within those walls, the wise masters plotted, secure in their belief that distance protected them from Daenerys' wrath. They had no idea what was coming. "For what it's worth," I said, my voice lower than before, "I wish things had been different between us." Daenerys turned her face toward mine, surprise evident in her violet eyes. She searched my expression, looking for mockery perhaps, or deception. Finding none, she nodded slightly. "So do I." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement of our shared blood, our shared loss, our shared destiny. For now, that was enough. As Viserion accelerated toward Yunkai, flames already licking at the edges of her massive jaws, I leaned forward, my lips nearly touching Daenerys' ear. "Let them see what happens when they wake the dragons," I corrected myself, feeling her shiver against me. Not just one, but two. Chapter 100. Fire and blood again. Zaran Zomar reclined upon cushions woven from the finest silks of Karth, their deep crimson hue reminiscent of wine. Or perhaps blood. The afternoon sun slanted through latticed windows, casting patterns across the marble floor of his private chamber atop Yunkai's tallest pyramid. 4 slave girls, no, servants, now, though the distinction existed only in name, fanned him with ostrich feathers imported at ridiculous expense from the Summer Isles. He sipped lazily from a jeweled goblet, savoring the vintage from his vineyards outside the yellow walls. The sweet liquid warmed his throat, bringing a smile to his lips. Today was a good day to be alive. A good day to be rich. A good day to be Zaran Zomar, master of masters, unofficial ruler of Yunkai. By now, Marine's rules and order must have been obliterated, he said aloud, though none of his slave girls replied. Their silence was proper. He hadn't asked a question, after all, merely stated a delicious fact. His gaze drifted to the city sprawled beneath his pyramid. Yunkai, resplendent in yellow brick and golden domes, stretched toward the distant bay. How easily they'd regained control after that silver-haired bitch had liberated them. The Dragon Queen had swept through like a summer storm. Violent, destructive, but ultimately temporary. "Fools," Zaran murmured as another servant lifted a succulent grape to his lips. They thought themselves so clever, those other masters. Squabbling like children over scraps while I positioned myself perfectly. "What do you think?" he asked the slave who fed him, hand roaming to her chest even though she was young enough to have been his granddaughter. She kept her head low. Why yes, of course. He liked her voice, although he failed to recall her name. What was it again? Anyhow, it had been almost too simple. While the others panicked after Daenerys Targaryen's departure, he'd calmly assessed the situation. Sent whispers to slaves about how much harder life was without their master's protection. Stoked fears among the nobility about rival families. Played each faction against the others until, piece by careful piece, he'd assembled the perfect hierarchy, with himself atop it. The patient predator always feasts, his father had taught him, before Zarin had arranged the old man's convenient demise. Patience had served him well, indeed. The messenger from Meereen had arrived that morning, confirming what his spies had reported. The Sons of the Harpy had no issues with preparation, so they must have perfectly staged their attacks by now. The Unsullied must have faltered. The Dragon Queen's supporters must be in chaos. He selected another grape, pointing his chin at it, and the young girl fed him. He ran his tongue over its smooth skin, her finger alongside it, before biting down. Sweet juice burst across his palate, matching his mood perfectly while the girl closed her eyes with a silent wince. He let her finger go, smirking. More wine, he commanded, gesturing to the girl. Now he recalled her age, although her name still eluded him. She was a girl no older than 14. The proper age, he mused. Old enough to be useful, young enough to be malleable. She moved gracefully, head bowed, to refill his goblet. Soon, all of Slaver's Bay would return to the old ways. His ways. Already, the other cities looked to Yunkai for leadership. Already, his network of spies and assassins extended through every major port from Volantis to Karth. And tomorrow, he said, raising his goblet in a mock toast to himself, we begin negotiations to restore the slave trade to its former glory. The world as it should be. The sudden crash of his chamber door flying open shattered the tranquility. A man stumbled in, one of his messengers, face slick with sweat, eyes wide with something Zarin rarely saw in his presence. Unbridled fear. How dare you enter uninvited? Zarin snapped, setting down his goblet with enough force to slosh wine onto the priceless carpet. Guards, my lord, the messenger gasped, dropping to his knees. Please, you must listen, I must do nothing you suggest, Zarin replied coldly. You will be flogged for this intrusion. The Sons of the Harpy, the man continued desperately, they've been slaughtered. Our network, exposed. The siege. Zarin sat up straighter, wine and comfort forgotten. Explain yourself. Now. Dragons, my lord. The messenger's voice cracked. 2 dragons descended upon the fighting pits. The golden one, it spoke. The Sons of the Harpy were destroyed in minutes. Molten gold flames engulfed them all. It was hell. And now, impossible. Zarin rose to his feet, his comfortable world suddenly tilting. The Dragon Queen has only one beast under her control, the other one was stolen. Our informants confirmed this. Not anymore, the messenger whispered. The brother, Viserys Targaryen, the king of Westeros, he commands the Golden Dragon. He saved the Dragon Queen when our assassins had her cornered. Rage rose in Zarin's chest, hot and sudden as dragonfire itself. His carefully constructed plans, his meticulous plotting, all threatened by these foreign upstarts with their unnatural beasts. You lie, he roared, advancing on the messenger. Our spies reported the brother was in Westeros. That the queen was isolated, her dragons contained. I only report what I saw, my lord, the man stammered, shrinking back. Zarin's fist crashed down on a delicate table, sending a crystal decanter shattering to the floor. Incompetence. Idiocy. Who leaked our plans? Which of you betrayed me? He whirled on his attendants, who had backed against the wall, their fans forgotten. My lord, one girl whispered, her voice trembling, perhaps we should send word to the other masters. Silence. Zarin bellowed, I'll have your tongue for speaking without permission. I'll have all your. The world exploded into golden light. Without warning, the far wall erupted inward. Sheets of flame cascaded into the room, instantly igniting the delicate silks and priceless tapestries. The slave girl who had dared speak disappeared in a column of fire, her scream cut mercifully short. Heat blasted Zarin's face, singing his beard, stealing the breath from his lungs. What? He gasped, staggering backward. More flames poured through the breach, hungry tongues licking at the ceiling, the floor, consuming everything they touched. Black smoke billowed upward, blinding him. Through streaming eyes, he glimpsed the messenger crawling toward the door, only to collapse as a burning beam crashed down upon him. The shrieks of the remaining girls pierced the roar of the inferno, a terrible harmony of fear and pain. Zarin stumbled toward the main entrance, but it too was blocked by fire, the wooden door already crumbling to ash. No. Not like this. Not after everything I've built. It can't be. Lungs burning, he dropped to his knees, crawling beneath the worst of the smoke. The heat pressed down like a physical weight, the skin of his hands blistering as they contacted the scorching marble floor. Through the billowing darkness, he spotted a rectangle of light, the balcony. His one chance. Inch by excruciating inch, he dragged himself toward it, the fine clothes he'd donned that morning now smoldering against his flesh. The pain was exquisite, unbearable, yet the alternative was worse. With a final, desperate lunge, he pulled himself onto the balcony, gulping the relatively fresh air. Only then did he look up. Yunkai, his beautiful city, his power base, his legacy, was dying. Golden flames engulfed the surrounding pyramids, their ancient stones cracking in the heat. Streets had become rivers of fire, and people fled like ants before a storm. Even at this height, the screams reached him, a chorus of terror that would haunt him if he lived long enough to remember it. And there, hovering against the smoke-darkened sky, was death incarnate. The dragon was more beautiful than Zarin had imagined, more terrible than his darkest nightmares. Scales like polished gold caught the light of the fires below, making the beast seem as if it were itself aflame. Wings wider than the greatest sailing ship beat the air with measured strokes, each movement precise and controlled. Its eyes, gods, its eyes, burned with intelligence no beast should possess. Atop the golden monster sat two figures, silver hair gleaming against the darkness. The dragon queen he recognized immediately, her face set in a cold mask of judgment. Beside her, one arm supporting her broken form, sat a man whose features mirrored her own, yet carried something harder, crueler, more calculating. Viserys Targaryen, the brother she'd left behind, the king who had conquered Westeros while she struggled in Slaver's Bay. The Targaryen who the Slaver's Bay should have feared instead. Together at last, come to deliver their vengeance. As if sensing his gaze, the dragon turned toward him, jaws parting to reveal teeth like black daggers. For one suspended moment, Zarin locked eyes with the beast, and felt somehow that it recognized him. Knew what he was, knew what he had done. His legs gave way beneath him, warm liquid spreading down his thighs as his bladder released in terror. All his power, all his wealth, all his schemes, worthless now. He would die here, watching his city burn, knowing he had failed. Shit, he whispered, the word inadequate yet somehow capturing the totality of his despair. The dragon's chest expanded, golden scales shifting like armor plates. Zarin saw light blooming in its throat, a sun rising behind monstrous teeth. His final thought was almost philosophical, a detached wonder at how something so beautiful could herald such complete destruction. Then came the fire, and Yunkai learned that dragons do not forgive, they do not forget, and they most certainly do not show mercy to those who have wronged them. You've received experience. You've received experience points. The air reeked of charred flesh and molten stone. Golden firestorms devoured Yunkai's pyramids in liquid rivers of light, each collapsing tower scattering embers like dying stars. My vision flashed with endless notifications, a cascade of pale blue boxes melting at the edges from the heat. Dany trembled against me, her whisper barely audible over the screams. Children, the slaves, they're burning too, brother. I shifted her weight in my arms as Viserion banked, granting us a panorama of the Masters' district crumbling into glowing fissures. Divine fire can't discriminate, unfortunately, I said, watching a dozen specks, people, statues, vanish in a burst of gold. Mortals make worthy ink when history needs writing. This, I nodded as another pyramid folded in on itself, is our scripture. She stiffened. Monstrous. I apologize if you think of me that way, but this is necessary. In my book. Below, the slums stood untouched, and crowds spilled into alleys to gawk upward. In the inferno's light, faces glowed orange, and mouths rounded with awe. Besides, not all of Yunkai burns. Only the higher district does, and even the civilians living here are corrupt. More than 90% of Yunkai was unharmed. I was hard-headed, but not cruel enough to burn them all. The few unlucky ones to burn beside the Masters were just unfortunate. Within the unharmed part of the city, I observed as a weaver dropped her basket, linen scraps scattering like white doves fleeing the flames. A smith's hammer fell forgotten as he sank to his knees. Viserion roared, and the city shivered. Dany's nails dug into my arm as the last pyramid collapsed, its rubble boiling the bay into steam. The system's chimes faded at one point, leaving only the crackle of annihilation. I inhaled deeply, ash and salt and something sweet. Power, distilled. Look, I murmured into her hair. They'll remember this day as liberation. Her breath hitched. Not agreement. Not yet. But below, a slave child pointed at us, laughing as his master's world burned. Chapter 101, Decisions of Dragons. The wind whipped around us, cold yet invigorating. A few kilometers behind us, the remains of Astapor still burned, a grim mirror of Yonkai's fate. Masters reduced to ashes, their legacy crushed beneath dragonfire and screams. Both those cities, responsible for the sons of Harpies' existence, had met justice. Dany had said nothing since we departed Yunkai, her body tense, her mind distant. Astapor's fate made her even quieter. I'd expected some emotion, anger, relief, confusion, but silence. I guess that also suited the moment. I gently tightened my grip around her waist, leaning down slightly so my voice reached her clearly over the wind. You haven't spoken a word in hours. Are you punishing me with silence, sister, or are you thinking? I asked with a joke. She shifted against me, uncomfortable, yet her voice was soft when she finally replied, I am thinking. I prompted. She turned her head slightly, eyes narrowed against the wind, staring at the distant horizon. Of how far things have drifted from what I wanted. Of how differently things ended compared to what I dreamed. She'd freed those slaves, but me making an example of the masters had claimed a few dozen, if not hundreds, of those poor lives too. This is the best outcome, sister, I said bluntly. You dreamed of freedom and justice, I commend that. And yet, you chose the wrong path. Stupidly so. The world isn't rays of sunshine. What I'm doing is somewhat extreme, but rulers need to be extreme. Daenerys was quiet again. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, tinged with regret. Perhaps you were right about me. I was a little caught off guard by her tone. This wasn't the defiant sister I knew, nor was she the woman who'd clawed her way through countless trials. This was someone broken, defeated, and doubting herself. When she hugged me earlier, it showed that she had accepted me. Our relationship was going to improve, but by doing so, she felt like she was killing some other parts of herself. Regret suits you poorly, Dany, I told her sharply. Whatever your faults, and you have many, weakness was never one of them. She didn't answer, merely looked down as Meereen came into view, its great pyramid rising proudly above the smoke and ruins. Let's not be sad over being a failure. It does neither of us good. My voice was harsh, but sincere. I am here because despite everything, your stubbornness, my cruelty, we're the last dragons. And dragons should stand together. If you're a failure, it's because you lack experience. Power. You'll have them both over time. Under you. Yes, under me. Don't say that as if that's a bad thing. You need to accept this. I'm the older child, and I am more powerful than you. It's facts. Don't beat yourself over it, and just take it easy. I said, a sigh escaping me. Her silence returned as Meereen grew clearer. I didn't press further, letting the words sink in as Viserion approached the pyramid. Whatever Dany was thinking, it would soon have to find voice. We reached the skies of Meereen soon, and people pointed at her. Some screamed in terror, recalling Viserion's wrath upon the sons of Harpy, and while some gasped in delight. Citizens now watched our arrival with wide eyes and hopeful faces. Viserion circled once above the pyramid's peak, where the remaining Unsullied lined up rigidly, their helmets tilted upward in awe, their spears raised in disciplined respect. Gently, I pulled Dany upright. Her startled eyes widened when I unfolded my wings behind me, the leathery span catching the wind as I stood atop Viserion's back. Hold tight, I ordered, scooping her into my arms. With one powerful stroke, I leapt into the air, wings beating strongly as Viserion roared her farewell. I'll go, and find that black dragon, Viserion said as she flew away. Be fast, I said. Together, Dany and I descended swiftly through the open window of the pyramid, landing with practiced grace on the smooth stone floor. Daenerys clung to me briefly, eyes wide, breath quick. Then I gently set her down, folding my wings neatly back. She steadied herself, looking around as familiar faces entered the room hurriedly, summoned by our dramatic arrival. Ser Barristan rushed forward, favoring his right leg with a slight limp, fresh bandages visible beneath his white armor. Ser Jorah followed close behind, his arm bound in a bloodstained sling. His face lit with relief at the sight of Daenerys. Daenerys, he breathed in relief, then caught himself with a quick glance at me. Khaleesi, we feared the worst. Missandei stood just behind them, her dark eyes brimming with emotion. My queen, she whispered, stepping forward with hesitant joy. Dany pulled her into a hug immediately. Behind them, Grey Worm leaned heavily against a nearby pillar, still weak from his wounds but standing tall through sheer determination. He nodded respectfully, his face remaining stoic despite the pain evident in his eyes. Tyrion Lannister lingered in the shadowy corner of the chamber, cradling a goblet of wine. His mismatched eyes studied us with that characteristic blend of wariness and calculation. As I promised you guys, I've brought her back, I announced calmly, eyes sweeping across them. Some bowed, some nodded in respect. We're grateful, Missandei said. Meet me in half an hour. It's time we talked. I yawned as I walked past them. Half an hour later, WS stood in the same chamber where chaos had erupted days before. Dany had just taken a bath as she returned to the room. The burned and shattered furnishings had been cleared, yet the scars of that day still lingered. She nodded at me, and then moved quietly to the window. She watched the city sprawl out beneath her, 1,000 unanswered questions in her eyes. The others gathered around the table, tense and waiting. I've ended Yunkai and Astaper's ability to threaten you, I began firmly, pacing slowly before them. Most of the sons of the Harpy have been killed by Viserion and I yesterday, and the few hiding don't have any backing. The wise master's gone, their power turned to ashes. Meereen is safe, for now. Esser Barristan exhaled visibly, relief clear on his lined face. You have our deepest gratitude, Prince Viserys. You are welcome, yes, but, I trailed off. I didn't do this solely for your gratitude or Meereen's safety. I did it to show what happens when the Targaryen name is challenged. And it's time you start calling me your grace, Esser. My sister has finally regained some sense thanks to this incident, and has accepted who's in charge. Barristan looked surprised and looked at Daenerys, who didn't say anything. Dany hadn't publicly taken the knee, but when she said, I won't fight anymore, she meant every word, so she didn't back off. Instead, she turned from the window, meeting my gaze steadily. What's next, then? I inclined my head slightly toward her. That's precisely what we must discuss. I'm not staying here. Meereen is secure, but Westeros demands my attention, and a dragon thief runs free. Tyrion leaned forward sharply, his mismatched eyes alert. Aegon and Rhaegal, you're going to capture them. Precisely. I stared directly at Daenerys now. Our pretender nephew has one of our dragons, sister. I intend to take it back, now that you've given yourself up to me. Thank you, she nodded at me. If I may, your grace, Tyrion interjected, swirling the wine in his cup, this Aegon, or whoever he claims to be, has built considerable support. He's won over the Golden Company, no small feat. And now with a dragon. Your concern is noted, Lord Tyrion, I replied coolly. Though I find it curious how invested you are in a pretender's chances. Tyrion's face remained carefully neutral. Merely offering perspective, your grace. Strategy requires understanding all possible threats. Indeed, I smiled thinly before turning back to Daenerys. Brother, she looked unsure of what to say. Young Griff must pay for his betrayal. But what do you expect from me? You didn't come just to inform me of your plans, I think. What are your plans with me? I was about to bring that up, I answered calmly. I've come to present you with a choice. The silence that followed was heavy, each pair of eyes flicking nervously between the two of us. Firstly, you can come to Westeros. Stand beside me, rule together. But understand this, Westeros has one true king. I will not tolerate divided loyalties. The Targaryen bloodline needs to continue, so take this as a marriage proposal too, even if it's silly that I have to propose such an obvious thing. Dany's expression was unreadable in my words. The others didn't look surprised. A marriage offer was hardly a shocker, given we were the last Targaryens, and our family had a history of incest. I continued, I can't promise you the title of queen, though, unless you win it on your own against my other two wives. However, I do promise that you will be a ruler even if those two become queens. You're my sister after all. I'd always love you more than them. Meaning, if you choose this option, you'll be a ruler, yes, but always beneath my crown. Her expression darkened slightly. Or, I smiled thinly, or, well, Slaver's Bay is an important geographical area. It's the only place capable of supporting life near the ruins of Valyria. Someday, I intend to venture into that location and reclaim it. Our true home. So, ruling Slavers Bay is beneficial. I mean, if you want, you can stay here in Marine, I explained carefully. Since you've submitted to me, it means Marine is under my control. But I don't plan to take your hard-earned city. I watched as everyone in the room exchanged glances. I continued, take Marine and the other 2 cities I burned as a gift from your dear brother. I'll allow you all the aid needed from here, and you will rule this city as you please. You will be the queen of this land, truly. But, I held up a finger, a queen subject ultimately to the king of Westeros. Daenerys looked away briefly, lips tight with thought. Initially, I only planned to bring her back home and expand the bloodline. But, one way or another, my sister had become more than a breeding cow. I couldn't deny her achievements, even if she'd made a lot of bad decisions. So I could allow her the freedom of ruling Essos if she wanted. After all, one day, I want to expand my rule to Essos, and marrying the queen who'll rule parts of it would help speed that up. In other words, I can let her play her little game of queen and then make her have my children a few years later. The advisors waited breathlessly, their fates hanging upon her words. You're asking me to choose between ruling in your shadow in a foreign land, or sitting under you on the Iron Throne, she finally said softly. I don't see much of a difference, brother. It's not much of a choice. No, I admitted, my eyes steady, but it's yours to create. Even if you rule under my shadow in Marine, the common folk won't know that. It will look like an alliance in their eyes. And they will always love you more than your intimidating brother, who occasionally swoops in on his dragon and burns everything in his path. You won't be loved the same way in King's Landing, I believe. The other 2 girls will make it challenging. Plus, here, you truly have your own kingdom, your own advisors, and everything. Except for me, I'll be a sea away. Then again, I doubt my absence is a bad thing for you. Our eyes met, and she showed no emotion. Regardless, both have their pros and cons. The choice is yours. You wanted power, Dany, you wanted freedom. But you must realize by now that neither comes without a price. Esser Barristan cleared his throat, stepping forward. If I may speak freely, your grace. I gestured for him to continue. I've served the Targaryen dynasty my whole life. I've seen its greatness and its challenges. His gaze flickered briefly between Daenerys and me. House Targaryen has always been strongest when united. When brothers stood with sisters, when family bonds remained strong against outside threats. A pretty sentiment, Esser Barristan, I replied. But history teaches a different lesson. Dragons fight dragons just as often as they fight together. Tyrion set down his goblet with a sharp click against the table. If I may offer another perspective, 2 Targaryens ruling different continents creates a dynasty spanning the known world. As long as you 2 don't have any serious disagreements in the future, I believe it wouldn't fail. I turned to Tyrion with renewed interest. Wise words, Lord Tyrion. Speaking of you, I believe I know something that might interest you. The dwarf tensed visibly. Oh, a woman named Shay. Your lover, I believe. She's currently in the Red Keep. His face drained of color. How do you? I'm the king, I interrupted smoothly. Little happens in my castle without my knowledge. She's alive and well, if that concerns you. The dwarf's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wine. And what do you intend to do with this information? Nothing sinister, I assured him. In fact, if you wish it, I could arrange for her safe passage to Marine. With proper guards to guarantee her safety. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. So that you can serve my sister well. As far as I see it, she'll need great help to rule. You keep insulting me, brother, Dany said, but there was barely any venom there. I ignored her. Tyrion studied me with wary eyes. And the price for this, goodwill? No price. Merely an acknowledgement that I am not the monster some believe me to be. I can be generous to those who serve loyally. I smiled. Even to those who might serve loyally in the future. Don't make a foolish decision when you hear about the Lannisters' fate at my hands in the future. He nodded slowly, processing my words. I understand. I'd appreciate it if you could send her to me, your grace. Thank you. Missandei stepped forward, cautious but determined. Your grace, what of the slaves? Their freedom, they remain free, I answered without hesitation. That much, I've granted unconditionally. They're servants now, who get paid, as Dany made sure when she first freed them. If you guys had any confusion in this regard, no, I'm not here to rewrite the rules my sister has already set up. Daenerys nodded, visibly relieved. Then I have my answer. But I need time. One night to fully decide. Very well, I accept it easily. Very soon, I'll depart, either with you at my side or with you atop this pyramid, queen of your own making. Tension seeped from the room slowly, giving way to murmured conversations. As the people began filing out, Daenerys approached me quietly. Thank you, she said softly, surprising me. For giving me a choice. I owed you that much from my own bad decisions, I replied evenly, holding her gaze firmly. Think carefully tonight, sister. One choice brings immediate power and legacy. The other, cold solitude but potential for greatness. Consider which you prefer. Her eyes softened slightly, holding my gaze. I already have. With that, she turned, leaving me standing alone beside the window. I turned to the night sky, waiting for dawn, and the fate that sunrise would bring. Chapter 102, Paths Forged in Fire. Morning light filtered through the pyramid's high windows, casting long golden beams across the polished floor. I stood facing my sister and her advisors, my hands clasped behind my back as I surveyed them all. The night had passed quickly, and I was eager to settle matters before returning west. Now that we've established the broader strokes of our arrangement, let's address immediate concerns, I said, my voice echoing in the chamber. Meereen and the surrounding territories need stable governance structure, immediately. Grey Worm remained stoic but attentive, while Ser Jorah couldn't quite hide his suspicion behind that weathered face of his. Tyrion, the calculating imp, leaned forward from his seat. If I may, your grace, Tyrion interjected, swirling his wine thoughtfully. The people need reassurance. The chaos of recent days has left them terrified. They've seen dragons battling in the sky, their queen vanishing, and then you arriving with devastating power. He set his cup down. A public appearance is necessary, immediately. The citizens must see Queen Daenerys alive and well, with you standing beside her as an ally, not a conqueror. I nodded slowly. The dwarf's political instincts were sharp. A valid point. I disagree with me standing beside her, though. Not physically anyway. She can just announce that I'm an ally. Ser Barristan cleared his throat. The security situation remains fragile, your grace. The foot soldiers of the Golden Company have all left. We couldn't do anything to stop them since that'd risk a battle that we couldn't afford. Fair point, I said. He continued, that aside, with your permission, I suggest organizing unsullied patrols throughout the city, particularly in areas where Sons of the Harpy sympathizers might hide. We could establish checkpoints at key intersections to monitor movement and root out any remaining resistance. The Sons will scatter like cockroaches now their masters are ash, I replied. But your caution is warranted. Proceed with the patrols. Missandei stepped forward, her eyes meeting mine directly. Brave woman, given what she'd seen of my power. Your grace, the survivors of Yunkai and Astaper will be terrified, leaderless. We should dispatch envoys immediately with promises of mercy and rebuilding efforts. If we don't reach out soon, chaos will spread beyond Meereen's walls. Her insight impressed me. The fear my actions had created could serve multiple purposes if properly channeled. I paced slowly, considering each suggestion. Very well, Lord Tyrion, draft a speech for my sister to deliver this afternoon. Keep it simple. Assure the citizens that Meereen stands strong, that the threat from rival cities has been neutralized, and that those who murdered innocents have paid the price. Tyrion nodded, already composing phrases in his head, I could tell. Ser Barristan, organize your patrols but ensure they're mixed, unsullied, accompanied by local volunteers where possible. The people must see themselves as participants in their own security, not merely subjects under occupation. The old knight bowed. As you command, Missandei, select trusted representatives, those who understand both slave and master cultures. Send them to collect survivors from Yunkai and Astaper. Make clear that while the old power structures are gone forever, those who accept my sister's authority will find shelter and opportunity. They all nodded with new purpose, the uncertainty of recent days giving way to clear direction. Even Ser Jorah's perpetual scowl softened marginally. One more thing, I added, watching them pause. This is assuming Dany wants to stay. Publicly she is the independent ruler of Slaver's Bay. I might change that later once I take care of young Griff, but for now, this is her city, her rule. I am merely an ally, ensuring its security. The subtle shift in their expressions told me everything. They were all right with it. With tasks assigned, I turned to Daenerys, who had remained silent throughout our planning. Her violet eyes watched me carefully, me who was giving a king's decree in her throne room. All of this will ease considerably if the people see you staying here, sister, I said, my voice softer now. I'm planning to keep Lord Tyrion and others here anyway to keep the rule, even if you decide to come to King's Landing with me. However, your presence would be the key factor to ensure lasting peace. I stepped closer, my eyes locked with hers. What do you say? Have you decided yet? Would she choose to come with me, or remain here? The chamber fell silent. Even Tyrion stopped fidgeting with his cup. The question hung between us like a blade, suspended by the thinnest thread. Daenerys straightened, and I noticed she'd regained some of her regal bearing despite her injuries. I have, she replied, her voice clear and steady. I will remain in Meereen. A flicker of relief crossed her advisors' faces, except Tyrion's. The dwarf had already calculated this outcome, evidently. I wasn't surprised either. Considering my speech so far, it was assuming she'd stay. It'd go against what I knew of her character if she decided to come with me. These cities need stability, my sister continued. The people I've freed need protection. And frankly, brother, she paused, measuring her words carefully. Your methods, while effective, would undermine everything I've built here. I see. Yes, I will be queen in Essos, under your authority as you've offered, but with my own approach to rule. Is that fine? She asked. I allowed a small smile to touch my lips. Yes, it's a wise choice, I said simply. Privately, I felt satisfaction settle in my chest. This was precisely what I'd anticipated, what I'd preferred. My sister would maintain this eastern foothold, extending Targaryen influence across the narrow sea without requiring my constant attention. Her presence here served me far better than dragging her back to Westeros would have. We'll formalize our arrangement before I depart, I added. A treaty between siblings, between continents. Tyrion opened his mouth to speak, likely to suggest terms favorable to Daenerys, but that was pointless. When I said formalize, I didn't mean a written contract. Dany was my blood, my property after she submitted to me, so it was simply a vocal yes or no record. Tyrion couldn't speak because the room suddenly trembled with a sound that shook the very stones beneath our feet. A dragon's roar. Then another, deeper and more powerful. We all froze, eyes darting to the balcony. The sound came again, two distinct calls echoing across the city. Viserion, I said, already moving toward the balcony. And, Drogon, Daenerys whispered, hope surging in her voice as she followed me, her advisors close behind. We rushed outside, the morning breeze whipping at our clothes as we gazed upward. There, circling the Great Pyramid, two massive shapes cut through the clouds, one golden as the sunrise, the other black as midnight. Viserion spotted me immediately, banking sharply toward our balcony with Drogon following more cautiously. My dragon's joy radiated through our bond as she approached. I found him, human, she announced. Black Dragon was injured, hiding in the mountains. I healed him with my fire. Viserion's thoughts reached me, pride evident in each word. She can do that. I realized only a moment later that she had a version of the ability I gained at level 50. Regeneration. I had felt it the second I clicked the option, that pulse in my bones, the fire under my scales, not just flickering now but raging. This body, now it could just fix itself. Blades that used to stab deep. Give me a minute, and I'll shake them off like water. Arrows, a joke. Even the worst cuts, they knit back together, seal shut, disappear. It took time, sure, but very short. My wounds healed faster than average even before this, thanks to my high end. But now, a lethal wound that meant lying around for days, hurting, could be healed in no time. The best part, it slowed down my aging. I didn't know by what rate, but I was another step ahead of mortality. I didn't get a system page explaining all this, but once I accepted the skill, the information bloomed in my head. I watched as Daenerys stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes as she beheld her lost child. My child, Dany muttered. Drogon circled warily, still cautious of Viserion, but his eyes focused intently on Daenerys. Drogon, she called, her voice breaking with emotion. The black dragon rumbled in response, not approaching but clearly recognizing his mother. One wing showed signs of healing, confirmation of Viserion's claim about finding him injured. I glanced sideways at my sister, studying the naked relief on her face. Her fingers stretched outward, trembling slightly as if she could touch her dragon across the distance. It seems our family reunion grows more complete by the hour, I said quietly. Daenerys turned to me, genuine gratitude in her expression. It was a look I hadn't seen directed at me in years, perhaps not since we were children. Thank you, she whispered. I simply nodded, a subtle smile playing at my lips as the dragons circled overhead, gold and black against the brightening sky. Hours later, the wind whipped Daenerys's silver hair across her face as she stepped onto the sun-drenched summit of the Great Pyramid. Her arm throbbed dully beneath its fresh bandages, a persistent reminder of her brother's strength and fury. Yet here he stood, calm now, his back to her as he patted Viserys's back. She paused, taking in the sight of them, brother and dragon bathed in golden morning light. So similar in coloring, in temperament, in the danger they presented. How swiftly things had changed. A fortnight ago, she'd been the conqueror, the liberator, the unburnt. Now she stood in her brother's shadow, watching him prepare to leave her with what remained of her former glory. "Brother," she called softly. Viserys turned, his violet eyes, so like her own, reflecting the sunlight. He'd changed since those desperate days when he'd sold her to Khal Drogo, he truly had. Power had transformed him, refined the ragged edges of his character into something both more terrible and more magnificent. "I thought you might not come to say farewell," he said, his voice lighter than she expected. Daenerys stepped closer, sensing Viserys's watchful gaze upon her. "I wanted to tell you again, face to face, that I'll remain in Meereen." She squared her shoulders, finding strength in the certainty of her decision. "This is where I belong. Don't get me wrong, but I barely saw the Iron Throne, I was an infant. So while I'm aware that it's my home, I don't feel the attraction to return." "Is that so?" he asked idly. "Yes. These people here, they need me, and I need space. I don't want to fight for your affection with other women." She met his eyes directly. "It's better this way, for both of us." Viserys studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "I don't blame you for this choice, if you're worried. You didn't have to come explain yourself like this. Westeros would have swallowed you whole. Here, you can build something lasting. Something yours." A half-smile touched his lips. "Though I expect regular reports on your progress. And for you to realize, what belongs to you, belongs to me too. Because you are mine." She stayed quiet, a little unsure at what she felt by his words. What was she supposed to feel? "I'll visit soon in a few weeks," he added, adjusting his golden gauntlets. "Westeros has its challenges, but Viserys makes the journey manageable. And I'll want to see how my eastern holdings prosper under your care." As she watched him stare at her, Daenerys felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. For all his cruelty, for all the pain between them, he was still her blood, the last true connection to the family she'd never known. "Yes, the pyramid is the home of the Dragon King now," she said, attempting lightness. He chuckled and stepped toward her. Before she could react, he leaned down and gently pressed his lips against her forehead. The gesture was so unexpected, so reminiscent of the brother who had once protected her, that Daenerys felt tears threatening to form. "Be strong, Dany," he murmured against her skin. "Rule wisely, and I'll come back soon. With or without Rhaegal." Then he withdrew, leaving a phantom warmth where his lips had touched. Daenerys blinked rapidly, refusing to let the stupid tears fall. She would not show weakness, not even now. Safe journey, brother," she managed, stepping back as Viserys mounted Viserys with practiced ease. The golden dragon stretched her massive wings, sending gusts of wind across the pyramid's summit. Daenerys watched as rider and mount rose gracefully into the air, circling once around the pyramid before banking westward, toward the distant shores of their ancestral home. Toward the deserts of Dorne. The breeze caressed her cheeks as Daenerys turned to face her city, her responsibility. Far below, the streets of Meereen pulsed with life, the citizens going about their day, unaware of the private drama that had unfolded above them. From this height, the problems that had seemed insurmountable appeared manageable, each challenge merely a puzzle to be solved by a queen who had survived fire, betrayal, and now, reunion. Drogon's distant roar echoed across the sky, a reminder that she wasn't entirely without family. She still had one child who had returned to her. One connection to the magic that had changed her life forever. Chapter 103, Dornish Sands. The evening breeze carried the scent of salt and spice through the open balcony doors of Arianne's chambers. She lounged against the cushioned window seat, absently twirling a copper strand of her hair between her fingers as she gazed across Sunspear's sprawling architecture to the narrow sea beyond. The waters glittered orange and gold in the setting sun, deceptively peaceful compared to the storm brewing in her heart. All those years listening to father's caution, his patience, his endless waiting, and for what? Arianne shifted restlessly, pulling her silk robe tighter around her shoulders. The political landscape had transformed so rapidly over the past few months. Viserys Targaryen, once dismissed as the mad beggar king, now commanded Westeros from the Iron Throne, with a dragon at his call and the might of the Reach and North behind him. And instead of seizing this opportunity, her father had chosen another path entirely. Aegon, she murmured to the empty room, the name tasting bitter on her tongue. A boy with silver hair who appears from nowhere, and suddenly he's Rhaegar's son risen from the dead. She didn't believe any of that bullshit. If not for these useless men, I would have been his queen. She grumbled out loud. Because her father had gone against Viserys' command, she'd lost her opportunity at becoming queen. To a naive little Stark girl and a Tyrell slut, no less. She thought of the letter she'd penned weeks earlier, written in haste and sealed with dread. A warning to Viserys about her father's shifting allegiance, about the Sand Snakes. Had it reached him, had it mattered, she'd risked much by sending it, defying her father's carefully laid schemes. And he didn't even bother to visit. She sighed. Well, not like I don't understand his position, but he really married 2 random women, after promising her so much. Somehow, she couldn't hate him though. Because it wasn't his fault. It was her useless, wheelchair-bound father's, so irritating. Her eyes drifted to the secret compartment in her dresser where she kept her personal correspondence. None had returned from King's Landing. Either Viserys had chosen not to respond in fear that she'd be caught, or perhaps worse, her messenger had been intercepted. That would make sense, actually. Arianne rose with fluid grace, bare feet silent on the cool tile floor as she approached her balcony. Far in the distance, the Shadow City pulsed with evening activity, merchants closing their stalls, taverns opening their doors, the endless dance of Dornish life continuing unaware of the political machinations that would determine their futures. Father doesn't trust me, she whispered to the breeze, frustration sharpening her words. After everything, he still keeps his deepest plans from me. Did that mean he found the letter, and that was why he didn't trust her with information? Prince Doran had revealed only the barest outlines of his strategy, enough to know he favored the supposed Aegon, but not enough to understand why. Not enough to counter his arguments effectively. He'd treated her like a willful child rather than his heir. And perhaps he was right to do so. The thought stung, but Arianne couldn't deny its truth. Had she not betrayed his confidence by warning Viserys? Had she not allowed her personal feelings to interfere with House Myrtell's strategy? She was so confused, so desperate. Her father, despite his weaknesses, was still that. Her father. She didn't want him to die, but the stuff he was doing was only going to warrant that. Damn it, she pressed her palms against the stone balustrade, feeling its rough warmth beneath her skin. What unsettled her most wasn't the politics. It was how often her thoughts returned to Viserys himself. The way his eyes had fixed on hers when they'd first met, the way he'd shattered her lowly expectations, the power in his movements during the duel, the hunger in his kiss. She'd meant to use those moments to her advantage, to secure her position, yet somehow. I became the one ensnared. Arianne closed her eyes, remembering their last encounter. His arrogance should have repelled her. His dismissal of her should have ended any attraction. Yet what lingered wasn't resentment but longing, a desire to match her fire against his, to prove herself his equal. Foolish girl, she chided herself. Thinking with your cunt instead of your head. Her duty was clear, to be honest. To stand with House Martell, support her father's decision. This Aegon, real or false, was the path her father had chosen. The path of vengeance for Elia and her children. The path that might return Dorne to glory. That was what she should have done, but Aegon himself. Arianne grimaced. She'd found nothing compelling about the young man during their brief introduction a few weeks ago. He seemed pleasant enough, handsome certainly, but he lacked the presence, the raw authority that Viserys commanded. He was polite, but he felt hollow somehow. She didn't think it'd change even if he had a dragon under his command. Father chose him without consulting me, she muttered. Makes his plans, signs his agreements, all the while telling me I'll rule Dorne someday. She laughed. It was a sound without humor. Rule what? The empty shell left after he's committed as to someone else's war. Did he truly consider her his heir, or merely a piece to be moved across the board when convenient? Arianne was fairly confident Dorne would perish if it continued going against the Dragon King, but yeah. Then again, he was right not to trust me completely. The thought surfaced unbidden. She felt guilty. I betrayed his confidence at the first opportunity. She stared up at the sky, loyalty to her house warred with her growing feelings for Viserys. Duty battled desire. The princess she was raised to be argued fiercely with the woman she had become. Arianne paced back into her chamber, conflicting emotions churning inside her. She paused at her writing desk, fingers hovering over a half-written letter. It was another message to Viserys explaining her position more fully. Would sending it be another betrayal? Or the wisest course to protect Dorne when the dragons inevitably clashed? Roarg. The sudden, distant roar split the evening air like thunder. Arianne froze, her heart leaping into her throat. That sound, impossible yet unmistakable. She'd heard it once before, when Viserys had revealed his golden dragon in the training yard. She rushed to the balcony, silk robe fluttering behind her like wings. Her eyes scanned the darkening sky, wide with anticipation. Another roar echoed across Sunspear, closer now, sending vibrations through the stone beneath her feet. Is it him? She whispered, her pulse quickening as a golden shape materialized against the sunset clouds. Dorne sprawled beneath me like a lover's body draped in silks of amber and gold. The setting sun painted the desert landscape in hues no artist could capture, sand dunes rippling like waves frozen in time, rocky outcroppings casting long shadows across the barren beauty, and the occasional patch of green where stubborn life insisted on thriving despite the harsh conditions. Sunspear itself rose from this artwork like a crown, its towers gleaming with the last light of day. I leaned forward on Viserion's back, savoring the wind against my face. Flying never grew tiresome. The utter freedom, the power, the perspective it granted, all of it reminded me how far I'd come from that pathetic, desperate prince I once was. The journey from Meereen had been long but necessary. My sister was secured, humbled, her power brought to heel under mine. Now I needed to resolve this issue with the false Aegon before it festered. Given young Griff's connection with Doran, his presence in Dorne was likely. Along with my missing dragon, Rhaegal. If Prince Doran had indeed chosen to back this pretender over me despite our previous understanding, I'd need to address that betrayal swiftly and decisively. If Fegin was here, today Dorne would burn hotter than ever before. Ideally, I'd find him, kill him, and reclaim Rhaegal without destroying Dorne in the process. While the betraying fools had to be punished, the common people shouldn't be. Even in Yunkai and Astaper, I tried my best to do minimal damage. The Martells were useful allies, or at least, they had been. Arianne's letters had hinted at her father's wavering loyalty, though her own feelings toward me remained complicated. I smiled at the memory of her fierce stubbornness clashing with her obvious desire. If I could secure her allegiance separately from her father's, she'd be a valuable member of the board. Circle lower, I commanded Viserion, scanning the sprawling palace complex below for any sign of Rhaegal's distinctive green scales. Viserion could also feel his presence through smell or something. Viserion obliged, her massive wings beating steadily as we descended. The air grew warmer as we approached the palace, carrying with it the sense of spice and salt that characterized this southern kingdom. Anything, Viserion? I asked, focusing on the bond we shared. No dragons, she replied, disappointment evident in her thoughts. Would like to save Green Brother. I sighed, frustration building in my chest. This search was proving fruitless. Aegon and Rhaegal likely weren't here. And I couldn't really burn it all without being sure since I was on a search. It'd be too cocky to land in the palace and question Doran about it. I was strong, incredibly so, but invincible. Against 1,000 soldiers, even I'd fall. Historically, Dorne was the only place where humans killed a dragon. I couldn't risk hastiness. Let's head to King's Landing, I decided aloud. We'll return first, and deal with the Dornish situation with an official decree. Maybe Robb Stark's scouts will have better information. If not, my next destination would be Pentos. That was where Illyrio Mopatis lived. Fegin could have gone there too. Viserion banked smoothly, preparing to turn northward when a voice carried up from below, clear despite the distance. Hey, you, a feminine voice shouted desperately. Leaving already, without even greeting your beloved. I recognized Arianne's voice instantly. My eyes narrowed as I spotted her on a palace balcony, her dark silhouette unmistakable against the pale stone. Her beautiful body, draped in red, was enough to make any lesser man drool. Spoiler: a plan formed in my mind, quick and dangerous and perfect. Without hesitation, I stood on Viserion's back, balancing with practiced ease. I'll be right back, I instructed Viserion. Be ready. I leapt from Viserion's back, the wind rushing past my ears as I plummeted toward the palace. My wings unfurled with a snap, the leathery appendages catching the air and transforming my fall into a controlled descent. I watched Ariane's expression shift from surprise to astonishment as I approached her balcony. Her mouth formed a perfect "oh," her eyes wide with wonder. The rush of power that came with such reactions never grew old. I landed on the balcony's edge with barely a sound, my wings extending to their full span behind me. Ariane stepped backward instinctively, her silk robe fluttering around her curves. "Your father chose poorly," I said softly, stepping toward her. "But you knew that already, didn't you, princess?" Fear crossed her face. For a moment, she must have thought I was going to kill her. "I'm joking, princess," I said. Before she could respond, I moved forward in a blur, wrapping one arm around her waist and lifting her effortlessly into the air. Her surprised gasp warmed my neck as we launched from the balcony, my wings carrying us upward with powerful beats. "You madman," Ariane exclaimed, her arms clutching around my neck, laughter mixing with genuine alarm. "You've just kidnapped a princess of Dorne." Below us, shouts of alarm rose from the palace guards who'd witnessed our departure. "Too late." I smirked, tightening my grip as we spiraled higher into the darkening sky. "Consider it tactical kidnapping. Maybe now your father will finally come to his senses." I met her eyes, allowing my voice to soften slightly. "Besides, I've missed you. I've missed these curves." "Why, your wives don't have it?" she asked, hitting my chest softly as she feigned anger. Viserion dived towards us from above the clouds, her massive form blocking out the emerging stars. Her eyes narrowed in what almost resembled a dragon's scowl as she recognized Ariane in my arms. "Hold tight," I warned Ariane as we approached my dragon. I landed smoothly on Viserion's back, settling Ariane before me. She trembled slightly, from excitement or fear, I couldn't tell. Perhaps both. Her body fit perfectly against mine as I secured her with one arm while gripping Viserion with the other. "To King's Landing," I commanded, and Viserion banked northward, leaving Sunspear and its confused guards behind. It felt good to kidnap a princess. Chapter 104, The Games We Play. The wind sliced past us, cold and clean, carrying the scent of evening. Ariane's hair whipped wildly against my chest as Viserion's wings beat steadily through the night sky. Her red silk robe fluttered dangerously, threatening to tear away completely against Viserion's scales. That thought brought a smile to my face. Below us, the darkening landscape of Westeros spread out like a living map, the red mountains of Dorne gradually giving way to rolling plains, forests, and rivers, all bathed in the pink-gold light of approaching dawn. The world looked small from up here. Kingdoms reduced to patches of color, castles to specks of stone, and armies to mere ants. Ariane's knuckles remained white where they gripped my arm. Despite her initial bold words at Sunspear, the reality of dragon flight had left her speechless for the first hour of our journey. Her body trembled against mine, from cold, fear, or excitement, I couldn't quite tell. Perhaps all three. "First time seeing the world from a dragon's back," I murmured near her ear, my lips brushing against her skin. "How does it feel to fly, princess?" Her laugh vibrated against my chest, half terrified, half exhilarated as she turned her head slightly. "Like nothing I imagined," she shouted over the rushing wind. "It's magnificent and terrifying, isn't it?" She hesitated, her silver eyes meeting mine with a flash of defiance. "Though I'd appreciate not being abducted next time." "I'm pretty sure this is what you wanted," I said, guiding Viserion into a gentle bank that made Ariane gasp and press herself more firmly against me. "Your eyes tell me you're enjoying this more than you're admitting." Beneath us, the landscape transitioned from the arid Dornish marches to the verdant fields of the Reach. Highgarden would be somewhere to the west, the seat of House Tyrell, my allies, and the family of one of my brides. I wondered briefly what Marjorie would make of my newest guest. We could directly go to King's Landing, but I was putting on a show. My first impression of Ariane wasn't the best, but given her choice of betraying her father for me, I saw her in a much more favorable light than before. For instance, Sansa and Marjorie would never betray their parents, their nations, for me. Not yet, anyway. Gradually, Ariane's body relaxed against mine, her natural curiosity overcoming her fear. She leaned slightly to peer over Viserion's side, watching as a hawk far below scattered in panic at our shadow. So," she said, not meeting my eyes, "why did you come to Dorne?" She asked, her voice carrying a hint of worry. "Your fiancé stole one of my dragons," I said. "He misused my dear sister's trust, stupid as it might have been on her part, and fled with a dragon. I thought he'd be in Dorne given your father's allegiance to him." "I see." She didn't have the courage to meet my eyes. Princess, I allowed my voice to drop lower, my arm tightening around her waist. Your father chose poorly. You know that. It irritates me that he's helping this fake Aegon. Her body stiffened against me, her spine suddenly rigid. Suddenly, she didn't seem to enjoy the flight anymore. So what will happen to Dorne now? The question carried the weight of her position. The heir to a now rebellious kingdom. She gently turned her head, fearful eyes locking with mine. Will you burn us like Yunkai and Astaper? Fear and defiance mingled in her voice. Rather than answering immediately, I tilted her chin up with my free hand, capturing her lips in a slow, possessive kiss. The intimacy somehow contrasted sharply with our precarious position thousands of feet above the ground. For a moment she resisted, but when she realized she didn't have to resist, she melted against me with practiced ease. Her hand slid up to lock around my neck. If I wanted Dorne in ashes, I said against her lips when we parted, I wouldn't have bothered kidnapping the princess. I'd have simply burned everything on sight. My eyes locked with hers. No, I have other plans for Dorne. For you. Tell your father when you next meet him. His nation only survived because I fancy his gorgeous daughter. Arianne's cheeks grew red, her silver eyes flashed with a mixture of relief, ambition, and lingering wariness. You're a liar. She bit her lips. Why else did you marry two random bitches? I warned you about father's schemes. I thought you abandoned me despite all that. Can I ever? Your loyalty will never be forgotten. I brushed a windswept strand of dark hair from her face, feeling the softness of her skin beneath my fingertips. Nor will your father's betrayal. Her playfulness vanished once again as she swallowed. I could see the conflict within her, torn between familial duty and personal survival. It was one of the things I found most intriguing about her. Unlike Marjorie with her unshakable political ambition or Sansa with her desperate need for security, Arianne walked a more complex line. Fiercely loyal to Dorne yet willing to defy her father's plans for her own vision of its future. Although she was a stubborn girl, she had the qualities of a ruler. So what happens when we reach King's Landing? She asked, her eyes searching mine. You'll be my prisoner, duh. The honored guest of my bedroom, I said, the words carrying multiple meanings that weren't lost on her. Her face reddened again. Let your father worry about what that entails. Arianne hit me on the chest softly, leaning her face into my neck. She was about to say something when Viserion suddenly banked sharply toward a cloud formation, causing Arianne to gasp and clutch me tighter. I smiled, enjoying both her fear and the press of her body against mine. The dragon seemed to understand my thoughts, deliberately making the ride more thrilling. Tell me, princess, I whispered into her ear, did you ever truly think you'd be queen? Or was that just a pleasant fiction? Her eyes narrowed. I was born to rule, just as you were. The difference is that I haven't had the chance yet, she said. She crossed her arms and looked away. It doesn't matter if you marry me or not. I would still become a queen, the ruler of Dorne. Hi lady, more like, I said, I'm gonna pull your little kingdom into the fold. She stayed quiet. Viserion dived through a cloud bank, momentarily surrounding us in cold mist. Arianne's startled cry turned into a breathless laugh as we emerged, the sun now fully risen above the horizon. Hours passed as we enjoyed ourselves in between small talks and serious ones. Now, the Blackwater Bay glittered in the distance, King's Landing rising from its shores like a crown of stone. Arianne said, her voice low and throaty, it doesn't look half bad. Sunspear is much better, though. Sure, I said, she was bold, even after being kidnapped. It would either be her greatest strength or her downfall. As Viserion began her descent toward the Red Keep, I felt Arianne's heartbeat quicken against my chest. Don't worry, princess, I imagine you'll find the capital quite accommodating. I'm not worried, she replied, though her grip betrayed her. Just wondering which of your wives I'll be wearing the clothes of tonight, since you didn't exactly give me time to pack. I laughed, the sound carrying away on the wind as the towers of the Red Keep grew larger beneath us. Perhaps you'll be wearing none at all. I've heard worse fates, she retorted, and despite everything, I laughed once again. The dawn sun bathed the world in orange. Viserion's massive shadow fell across the Red Keep's central courtyard, causing guards to scramble into defensive positions. The golden dragon circled once before, descending with surprising grace, her wings creating gusts that sent servants scattering. Scrolls and linens danced through the air, and a small dog barked frantically before running for cover. I dismounted first, feeling the satisfying crunch of gravel beneath my boots. Then I turned to lift Arianne down with deliberate showmanship, my hands lingering at her waist. The courtyard had fallen silent, all eyes fixed on us, the Dragon King and his unexpected companion. Arianne stood unsteadily, still dressed in her silk Dornish nightclothes, her dark hair wild from the flight. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin with practiced dignity despite her disheveled state. Guards stared openly at us, and I saw more than one taking in the outline of her body beneath the thin fabric. "Welcome to King's Landing, Princess," I said loudly enough for all to hear. "I trust you'll find the hospitality here superior to Sunspear's." Before she could respond, the courtyard doors swung open with dramatic timing, revealing Margaery Tyrell. She advanced with practiced grace, wearing an elegant green gown embroidered with golden roses. Her chestnut curls were arranged in the latest King's Landing fashion, and a delicate golden circlet rested on her brow, not quite a crown, but a clear statement of her aspirations. Her eyes fell on Arianne for a moment before she looked at me. While her smile was genuine to most observers, I noted the calculation behind her eyes as she took in the scene before her. "My beloved husband returns," Margaery announced, dipping into a perfect curtsy before rising to kiss my cheek. Her lips lingered a moment longer than necessary. "We had no word of your arrival. I would have prepared a proper welcome." Her gaze slid to Arianne, taking in the disheveled appearance and unmistakable Dornish features. "And with a guest, I see. Princess Arianne Martell," I introduced, watching Margaery's reaction carefully. The slight tightening around her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "She'll be staying with us until decided otherwise." Princess Arianne, Margaery's voice remained melodious despite the tension vibrating between the two women. "What an unexpected pleasure. We heard nothing of a Dornish delegation." "There was no delegation," Arianne replied, lifting her chin. The morning sun caught her silver eyes, making them flash like polished steel. "His Grace found me, irresistible company for his journey. And abducted from my balcony. I fear my father is having trouble breathing by now. I look forward to that." That was the plan. Doran would get worked up and contact me, and then I'd see what that spineless bastard could do. The two women measured each other with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "That sounds unfortunate," Margaery said, looping her arm through mine possessively. Her fingers pressed into my forearm with slightly more force than necessary. "We must arrange suitable chambers immediately. The dungeons, or perhaps in the Maidenvoe. It's quite secure." "No, the royal wing would be more appropriate," I corrected mildly. "The princess is our most distinguished guest, after all. No matter if she's the daughter of an opposing nation." Of course, my love," Margaery agreed, though her smile tightened fractionally. "I only thought the Maidenvoe might offer more privacy. The royal wing can be so busy with activity." A commotion at the doorway drew our attention as Sansa Stark emerged, her auburn hair gleaming like copper in the morning light. Unlike Margaery's calculated entrance, Sansa's surprise was genuine as she took in the scene before her. Her tully blue eyes widened at the sight of Arianne. "Your Grace," she curtsied to me before her gaze fixed on Arianne's exotic appearance. We weren't expecting your return so soon." I extended my free arm to Sansa, painting a picture of power for all the courtyard to see, the Dragon King flanked by two queens in waiting, with the Dornish princess standing separate. "Lady Sansa, meet Princess Arianne of House Martell." Sansa's courtesies were perfect but her discomfort obvious. Yes, welcome to King's Landing, Princess." "Thank you, both." Arianne studied both women with interest, quickly assessing the dynamic. "Lady Stark, Lady Tyrell. I've heard much about the King's gorgeous brides." Her emphasis on the final word carried just enough insolence to make Margaery's cheeks flush slightly. They weren't queens but rather brides. In that sense, Arianne's position was no less than theirs, as the princess of a nation of her own. "And we've heard of you too," Margaery countered smoothly. "The princess who would be the ruler of Sands. How disappointing that must be." "Not as disappointing as sharing a husband with another woman," Arianne replied, her smile sharp as a dagger. "Though I suppose it's less crowded than sharing with an entire court, as I hear was Lady Margaery's experience with her first husband." Margaery's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened to flint. "You do realize what you're saying, correct? The king is right here." "That's true, Arianne," I shot her a look. "Such behavior warrants punishment." "Oh," Arianne purred, "I don't understand why your grace is threatening me with a good time." Some of the guards gasped at that. The air between the three women crackled with unspoken challenge. I observed with amusement. There was nothing more entertaining than watching skilled players test each other's defenses. And all three were remarkably skilled, in their own ways. After a moment of silence, Sansa cleared her throat delicately. Princess Arianne must be exhausted from her journey. Perhaps we should show her to her chambers. How thoughtful, Lady Stark, Arianne said, her tone softening slightly. Though I seem to have arrived with only what I'm wearing. I left Dorne rather abruptly. I'm sure we can find something suitable, Sansa offered, her natural courtesy overcoming her wariness. Something of mine, perhaps, Marjorie suggested with a gracious smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though I fear they may be a bit loose in certain areas. Arianne burst out laughing. I doubt that, she responded pleasantly. But thank you for the kind offer. However, I think His Grace would love to show me around on his own first. Yes, Princess Arianne requires rest and fresh attire after our journey, I announced, intervening before the barbs could escalate further. I'll show her around, you two can rest assured. The two girls fell silent, exchanging a look. Perhaps they'd bond over it. I led Arianne inside, while behind us, courtiers whispered among themselves, already spreading word of the Dornish princess's arrival and the tense exchange between the three women. This silly Game of Thrones had taken yet another unpredictable turn, this time by my design. I was curious how amusing the next few days would be. Chapter 105, Games of Desire. I guided Arianne through the torch-lit corridors of the Red Keep, her bare feet padding softly on the stone floors. The morning light streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows as servants scurried past with downcast eyes that darted up the moment they thought we weren't looking. The courtyard murmur faded behind us as stone walls swallowed our footsteps. Arianne hugged my arm, her hips brushed against mine with calculated precision each time the corridor narrowed. Her breath warmed my neck as she leaned close to examine a dragon's skull mounted on the wall, fingertips grazing charred bone where Balerian's fire had once raged. For a prisoner, she mused, her words a warm pulse against my ear, you grant me interesting liberties, Your Grace. Showing me around and all. Guards snapped to attention as we passed, eyes fixed straight ahead. Their discipline frayed at the edges. One young recruit's gaze lingered too long on the silk clinging to Arianne's hips before I snapped my fingers. He flinched, crimson flooding his cheeks as he jerked his head forward. Arianne laughed, the sound rich and dark as Dornish wine. Poor boy, your servants lack subtlety, Arianne remarked, her voice low enough that only I could hear. In Dorne, they at least pretend not to stare. Somehow I doubt that, given how horny your people are, I said. Or maybe it's because they're always horny and have a bit too much sex, they become numb to whorish dresses like yours. Hey Tilda, that's rude. On the other hand, my people are simply curious about the woman who arrived on Dragonback, I replied, enjoying the way her silk robe fluttered around her curves as she walked. It's not every day their king returns with a Dornish princess in her nightclothes. We passed an artwork depicting Aegon the Conqueror atop Balerion, raining fire upon his enemies. Arianne paused, studying it with an unreadable expression. Is that what you intend for Dorne? She asked, silver eyes reflecting the torchlight. Fire and blood. I placed my hand at her waist, guiding her forward. That depends entirely on your father. Two Kingsguard stood at attention outside my chambers, one a head taller than the other. Lady Commander, I greeted Brienne of Tarth. It's nice to see you guard my empty chambers. She cleared her throat, straightening her back. Welcome back, Your Grace. And I apologize. I'm new at this, so I didn't know what to do in your absence. No need to apologize. This is Arianne Martell, our captive. In the future, be sure she doesn't escape, I said, making the dark-skinned princess giggle. I'll be sure to keep an eye, Brienne nodded. Great. Now, I'd like some privacy, I said, and with a slight nod, I dismissed them, watching as they retreated down the corridor. Their armor clinked softly as they departed, leaving us in momentary silence. I pushed open the heavy oak door, revealing the royal apartments within. Arianne stepped past me, her eyes widening slightly as she took in her surroundings, the massive bed draped in black and red silks, the dragon motifs carved into every surface, the balcony offering an unrivaled view of King's Landing and the bay beyond. Not bad, she admitted, trailing her fingers along a silver dragon statuette. Though the dragon theme might be a touch excessive. I closed the door behind us, the heavy latch falling into place with a satisfying thunk. Says the woman whose homeland is decorated with spears and suns. We Dornish are nothing if not consistent. She moved through the space with deliberate confidence, examining paintings and furnishings with an appraiser's eye. The morning light streaming through the balcony doors caught in her dark hair, highlighting strands of copper. You'll have your own chambers later, I said, watching her explore. Perhaps adjacent to these, with a connecting door. Suitable for a princess, if not quite as grand as what you're accustomed to in Sunspear. Arianne turned to face me, her head tilted slightly. How thoughtful. And will you lock that connecting door at night? Would it matter if I did? A smile played on her lips. Locks are merely suggestions in Dorne. Before I could respond, she moved toward me with surprising swiftness. Her hands found my wrists, and with a graceful motion that caught me off guard, she pulled me toward the bed. I allowed it, curious where her boldness would lead. We tumbled onto the mattress, her beneath me, her silk robe parting to reveal the smooth bronze skin of her chest and the dark peak of one nipple. Her silver eyes shone with challenge as she bit her lower lip, arching slightly beneath me. What exactly do you think you're doing, princess? I asked, supporting my weight on my forearms as I looked down at her. Exploring my accommodations, she replied innocently, though her fingers had begun tracing patterns on my chest. The bed seems comfortable enough. I wouldn't want to complain to my captor. Her tongue darted out, wetting her lips as her other hand slid up my arm to my shoulder. It was amusing, so I didn't stop her. So tell me, Your Grace, do you always kidnap women from their homes, or am I special? I chuckled, feeling her body shift beneath mine. Only the ones who write me secret letters betraying their king fathers. And here I thought it was my winning personality. Her legs parted slightly, allowing me to settle more comfortably between them. The thin silk of her robe did little to hide the heat of her body. Maybe I just wanted to see how your father would react, I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She pouted, a deliberate, practiced gesture. Your words keep hurting me. Here I was hoping you wanted me all for yourself, Daddy. The word, delivered with her exotic Dornish accent and accompanied by a deliberate roll of her hips, sent an unexpected jolt through me. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her boldness. She'd called me the same the first time I fucked her, but this time it was sweeter to the ears. Your actual father would have a heart attack if he heard you speak that way, I said, watching her expression carefully. Not if I please you properly, Daddy, she purred, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. Her fingers slid into my hair, pulling me closer until our lips were mere inches apart. Isn't that what good little princesses do? I could smell the spice and citrus scent of her skin, feel the warmth of her breath against my lips. And are you a good little princess, Arianne? Why don't you find out? She challenged, then closed the distance between us. Her lips were soft but insistent, tasting of Dornish wine and desert heat. The kiss deepened as her fingers tightened in my hair, her body arching against mine with desire. I could feel the rapid beat of her heart, the heat of her skin through the thin silk. When we finally broke apart, her silver eyes were dark with desire, but that calculating intelligence remained. It was watching, assessing, planning. Her passion was genuine, that was for sure, but she also meant it when she said she wanted to please me. She wanted to please me so that I wouldn't obliterate her nation. And that, perhaps, made her one of the most delicious of all my conquests. Arianne's fingers traced the contours of Viserys' chest, her touch featherlight yet deliberate. Her silver eyes held his gaze with a boldness few in the Seven Kingdoms would dare. Without breaking eye contact, she twisted her position. She pushed him onto his back and straddled him, her silk robe sliding further open. Let me please you, she whispered, her Dornish accent thickening with desire. Let me show you what a princess from the south can do. She lowered her head, pressing her lips against his neck, trailing kisses down to his collarbone. Her fingers worked the fastenings of his doublet with practiced ease, revealing more of his pale skin with each movement. Viserys watched with amusement as she undressed him, her fingers nimble despite their trembling eagerness. When his chest was bare, she moaned. How do you even more gorgeous now? Training, he said. She traced the defined muscles with reverent fingertips before lowering her mouth to his skin. Her tongue left hot, wet trails across his torso, pausing to circle each nipple before continuing downward. Beautiful, she murmured, lowering her head to trace her tongue along the ridges of his abdomen. My Dragon King, you taste like power, she murmured against his abdomen, her teeth grazing lightly over his skin. Viserys tangled his fingers in her hair, enjoying the silky texture. Is that what you crave, princess? Power. She looked up at him through her lashes, her smile wicked. Among other things, Daddy. He chuckled at her boldness, then gripped her waist and flipped her onto her back in one fluid motion. The thin silk of her robe had ridden up to her thighs, revealing more of her curves but still preserving the tantalizing mystery beneath. He made no move to remove it, The clothes made her look even more beautiful. So eager to please, he murmured, his hands exploring the soft flesh of her thighs, her hips, her waist. Such a desperate little princess. Ariane arched into his touch, her breath catching as his fingers skimmed over her breasts through the silk. Only for you, she gasped, her hips lifting involuntarily when his thumb brushed against her clit. Only for my king. Viserys lowered his head to capture her mouth again, swallowing her moans as his fingers continued their exploration. He could feel the heat of her through the thin fabric, the dampness already gathering there. Without warning, he gripped her hips and yanked her toward his face, positioning her legs over his shoulders. Her robe still covered her, and he ducked his head beneath the silk, his breath hot against her inner thighs. "Oh gods, what are you doing?" Ariane whimpered, her fingers clutching at the bedsheets. "Please, your grace." His tongue found her center, and her words dissolved into a high, keening moan. Her thighs trembled against his shoulders as he worked his tongue, alternating between gentle laps and firm strokes that made her entire body jerk. "This," she gasped, her voice breaking. Oh gods, like that, don't stop." Her hips bucked against his face as he intensified his efforts, his hands gripping her thighs to hold her in place. The silk of her robe tented over his head, creating an intimate cocoon of heat and desire. "I can't. I'm going to." Ariane's words came in broken fragments as her body tensed. Her back arched off the bed, her moans growing louder, more desperate. "Please, please, oh gods." Her release washed over her in waves, her body convulsing as she cried out. Viserys continued his ministrations, drawing out her pleasure until she collapsed back onto the mattress, chest heaving with each ragged breath. When he emerged from beneath her robe, her face was flushed, her eyes half-lidded with satisfaction. But there was still hunger there, a need not yet fully sated. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse, as she watched him wipe his lips. "Let me taste you now. Let me use my mouth for you. I need it. I need to please you properly." Viserys stood, his fingers working at the laces of his breeches. "Since you ask so sweetly, princess." Ariane's eyes widened as he freed himself, her lips parting in surprise. "I think you're bigger than before, ngh." She moaned just at the sight, her tongue darting out to wet her lips in anticipation. He moved to the edge of the bed, gripping her by the neck and positioning her so her head hung over the side. Her dark hair spilled toward the floor as she gazed up at him, her throat exposed and vulnerable. "Open," he commanded, and she obeyed immediately, her lips parting to receive him. Viserys pushed forward, watching as her mouth stretched around him. The wet heat of her throat enveloped him as he pressed deeper, feeling her gag reflex flutter against his length. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but her hands reached up to grip his thighs, urging him deeper. "Such a good princess you are, Ariane," he growled, beginning to thrust. "Taking your owner's cock so well. I'm going to own your little nation soon. How does it feel choking on my cock knowing that?" Her mind throbbed with pleasure, and she was in no position to reply. An attempt made Mer moan harder, as she felt her pussy twitch. He withdrew, and then he slammed back inside. Ariane's sense of reality blurred. Each thrust pushed him deeper into her throat, the tight, wet passage gripping him like a silken vice. Saliva pooled at the corners of her mouth, trickling down her cheeks as he established a relentless rhythm. Her throat bulged with each thrust, her eyes watering more profusely as she struggled to accommodate him, yet she never pushed him away. Her hands remained on his thighs, her silver eyes locked on massive cock coming in and out of her mouth even as tears streamed from them. His hand roamed her body, feeling her boobs, pinching her nipples. The wet, obscene sounds of her throat working around him filled the chamber, punctuated by his grunts and her muffled moans. As his pleasure built, Viserys increased his pace, his fingers tightening in her hair. Ariane's eyes began to roll back, her consciousness narrowing to the single point where they were joined. Her throat convulsed around him, her body trembling with the effort of taking him so deeply. With a final thrust, he buried himself to the hilt, his release pulsing down her throat. He held her there, watching as she struggled to swallow, some of his seed escaping to trickle from her nose. "Gah!" she gasped when he finally withdrew with a wet pop. Ariane lay gasping for breath, her eyes unfocused and glazed. Her lips were swollen and red, glistening with saliva and traces of his seed. Tears had left tracks down her temples into her hair, and her chest heaved with each desperate breath. The silk robe clung to her sweat-dampened skin, outlining every curve of her body. She looked utterly debauched, utterly conquered, and utterly beautiful. After a moment, she found her voice again, though it was raw and raspy from his use. I want it from my pussy too, Daddy, she begged, her fingers trailing down her body to spread herself for him. Please, I need you inside me. Is that so? All right, Viserys said and climbed onto the bed, flipping her onto her stomach with ease. The curve of her back dipped gracefully to the swell of her rounded buttocks, the silk robe bunched around her waist now. Her skin gleamed with a fine sheen of sweat, giving her bronze complexion a golden glow in the morning light. Without warning, he gripped her hips and slammed into her, burying himself to the hilt in one powerful thrust. Her eyes snapped wide in shock. How does it feel better than last time? Her mind whirled as her mouth parted wide. Arianne screamed, her fingers clawing at the sheets. Oh gods, fuck, oh my, so big, Daddy H, you're so deep. Viserys established a brutal pace, his hips slapping against her beautifully shaped ass with each thrust. The bed creaked beneath them, the headboard banging against the wall as he drove into her repeatedly. Slow down, she gasped, her words barely audible between moans. I can't, it's too. Instead of complying, Viserys tangled his fingers in her hair and yanked her head back, arching her spine at a painful angle. I won't slow down. Isn't this what you wanted, princess? He growled, increasing his pace. To be fucked by the Dragon King while your father sits helpless in Sunspear. To be fucked like the little slut you are. Yes, she cried, tears streaming down her face again. Gods, yes, yes, fuck me, ruin me for anyone else. Make me your slut, your princess slut. Right there. Her body shuddered beneath him, her inner walls clenching around his length as another orgasm tore through her. Viserys didn't slow, continuing his relentless assault on her senses. You like this? She gasped between thrusts, her words fragmented by moans. You like, fucking that weak, crippled Doran's daughter. Making me, call you daddy. Making me, ngh, your whore. The words, filthy and broken, spurred Viserys on. He gripped her hips harder, leaving bruises on the soft flesh as he pounded into her. Yes, she moaned, I'm daddy's whore, so tell me how much better I am than those two bitch wives of yours, Arianne demanded, her voice rising in pitch as pleasure overwhelmed her. Tell me, how much tighter, my Dornish cunt is. Viserys felt his release approaching, his rhythm faltering as pleasure coiled tighter in his core. With a final thrust, he pulled out, his seed spilling across her lower back in hot spurts. Arianne collapsed onto the bed, then rolled over to face him, her chest heaving. Even Viserys was panting now, for he'd fucked her wholly. Her silver eyes, though glazed with satisfaction, held a challenge as she reached down to spread herself open with her fingers. Why did you come outside, Daddy? She purred, her voice a hoarse whisper. She spread her soaked folds, fingers jerking open her flushed pink. Put a dragon in my womb. Let me raise your babies on Dornish gold, let them dance before father's eyes while I keep moaning for you. Please, Daddy. The sight of her, disheveled, used, and still begging for more, sent a fresh surge of lust through Viserys. With a grumble, he positioned himself between her thighs once more and slammed into her, losing himself in the heat of her body as the day outside turned into night. Hours later, she passed out beneath him, breath ragged, lips and cunt swollen and used. Chapter 106. Westerosi Politics. The water gardens hummed with the quiet melody of distant fountains and the gentle rustle of orange trees swaying in the breeze. Within Prince Doran Myrtell's private solar, that peace transformed into an oppressive silence. Doran sat in his wheeled chair beside the open window, the parchment trembling slightly in his gout-ridden hands. The letter's seal, broken now, bore the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen, though not from the king that ruled the Seven Kingdoms right now. Sunlight streamed across the polished marble floor, creating a sharp line between light and shadow that bisected the room. On one side sat Doran, bathed in golden light, and on the other paced his brother. His younger brother was coiled with tension. Baron Myrtell's boots clicked rhythmically against the floor as he moved, the sound breaking the silence like a heartbeat. His dark eyes never left his elder brother's face, searching for any hint of the thoughts behind that carefully composed mask. 3 days, Baron said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since the letter's arrival. 3 days since the Dragon King took her, and not a word from Arianne herself. The words were heavy with accusation and fear. Doran's fingers carefully refolded the letter along its creases, the deliberate motion betraying none of the turmoil beneath. His face remained impassive, though a muscle in his jaw twitched slightly. But plenty of words from others, Doran replied, his voice steady despite everything. The whole of Dorne whispers about it now, how the Dragon King plucked their princess from her balcony. He looked up at his brother, his eyes hardening. Don't expect words from her. It's her fault. She called him from the balcony, and he flew down. A baron halted mid-stride, his expression darkening. Maybe we should have put her in a tower without a balcony, he remarked with bitter humor. Though there was no delight in his eyes, he resumed his pacing, shadow stretching and contracting as he moved through patches of sunlight. What does our king, Aegon, say about this? The emphasis on king carried all the venom the Red Viper was known for. Doran held the letter out to his brother, his movements slow thanks to the pain in his swollen joints. The boy has made a strategically smart call, Doran said, his tone revealing nothing of his true feelings. Read for yourself. A baron snatched the parchment from his brother's hand, his eyes scanning the flowing script quickly. With each line, his expression darkened further, his lips pressing into a thin line until they nearly disappeared altogether. Brother, this reads to me that our silver-haired hope has abandoned us as quickly as he claimed us, a baron said, his voice dangerously quiet. Doran said nothing, watching his brother's rage build with each passing second. The silence extended between them again, broken only by the distant laughter of children playing in the pools outside. He says he's somewhere safe. Away from trouble. He won't come to Dorne because Viserys might look for him here. A baron crumpled the parchment in his fist, knuckles whitening with the force of his grip. You pledged our spears to this boy, brother, and now he hides while my niece is held captive. Doran's expression remained unchanged, though something flickered behind his eyes, a brief acknowledgement of the truth in his brother's words. A calculated risk, Doran said quietly, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. It makes sense from his position. Forgive me, but are you blind, brother? A baron asked, frustration evident in every line of his body. Doran said nothing. The silence itself was an admission. He failed you, a baron said sharply, jabbing a finger toward Doran. I warned you about abandoning Viserys. I warned you the moment we heard he had wings and a dragon. You said everything will be all right when Aegon takes a dragon of his own. Now he did, and what does he do? Neither of us knows. Prince Doran wheeled his chair away from the window, moving with practiced efficiency toward a map table displaying Dorne and its surroundings. The elaborate cartography showed mountains, passes, coastlines, all the natural defenses that had protected Dorne for centuries. Defenses that meant nothing against a dragon. I'll admit this doesn't please me, Doran said, his fingers tracing the outline of Sunspear on the map. But he must have his reasons. If he were planning to abandon us, he wouldn't have bothered to write to us. I'll choose to trust him for now since we've already made the decision to go against Viserys. His fingers stilled on the map as he looked up at his brother. Send an official letter to King's Landing demanding they return Arianne. A baron sighed, the sound carrying all the weight of his frustration and worry. You know why he took Arianne. He won't just return her to us unless we hand over this Aegon. That is our nephew, a baron. Doran turned his gaze back to the window, to the horizon where dark clouds gathered over the summer sea. Since he's claimed a dragon, that proves his Targaryen blood. We can take this little risk for his sake. The distant rumble of thunder echoed the unspoken fears in the room. I don't like this, brother. A baron said after a moment of silence, following his gaze out the window. Neither do I, Doran replied, gazing at the distant horizon where a storm gathers over the summer sea. Bad times might be coming for Dorne, but Doran wasn't going to keep pretending to be a weakling. I drummed my fingers against the carved surface of the small council table, enjoying the momentary silence before the discussions began. The midday sun streamed through the high windows, casting sharp bands of light across the chamber's stone floor. The room smelled faintly of beeswax and parchment, an improvement over the usual stench of the city below. Speaking of, I still gotta fix that. But I need so much gold. The table before me was now a smaller council than before, but one I could actually trust, more or less. Rose sat to my right, dressed in deep burgundy finery that complemented her copper hair. She'd taken to her role as mistress of whispers with remarkable ease. Behind my chair stood Brienne of Tarth, her white Kingsguard armor gleaming in the sunlight, hand resting on her sword hilt. Opposite me, Robb Stark sat with the rigid posture of a man unused to southern politics, but his eyes remained sharp and attentive. I'd left several seats deliberately empty. Mace Tyrell was still in Bravos, and Grand Maester Pycelle was notably absent, The doddering old fool had served too many regimes, and his loyalties were suspect at best. Plus, there was that thing where he had romantic feelings for Tywin. I'd deal with him once I'd secured more trustworthy replacements. I fingered the sealed letter bearing the Martell sigil that had arrived that morning, tapping it deliberately on the table. A letter came from Dorne today, I announced, cutting through the formal atmosphere. By now, I trust everyone has heard about our Dornish guest, so you can guess what the letter contains. Princess Arianne Martell now resides in the Red Keep as our honored hostage. Robb Stark's brow furrowed. Even though he'd learned the southern game quickly enough, he still maintained that refreshing northern bluntness. Hostage, Your Grace, he questioned, the words careful but direct. I heard you and her share a peculiar relationship, though. Even if Sansa hadn't told her about it, it would be difficult to miss the moans coming from the king's bedchambers for 3 whole days. As the brother of my wife, who was also a king, the news didn't sit well with him. But perhaps out of fear of his sister's treatment in the future, he didn't show displeasure outright. I smiled. It's simply insurance, Robb. It's a lot easier to keep women in check this way. I'm sorry if my words sound disgusting, I said. Brienne of Tarth shifted uncomfortably behind me. Robb just sighed. I leaned back in my chair and continued. Anyhow, the issue is that Prince Doran made the unfortunate decision to support a pretender claiming to be Aegon Targaryen. He's a thief who stole one of my sister's dragons. With Arianne here, I now have something of equal value. Somewhat. Of course, a mere Dornish princess would never have the same value as a dragon, but in the political landscape of manipulation, it evened out somewhat. More than that, she's the insurance against burning Dorne to the ground, I thought but didn't add. Some thoughts were better kept private, even in this smaller council. I tapped the sealed letter. This will likely be a formal demand for his daughter's return, accompanied by promises and platitudes. Then I broke the seal with my thumb, confirming my suspicions as I scanned its contents. As expected, Doran claims ignorance of any plot against the crown and demands his daughter's safe return. I set the letter aside. We'll let him stew a bit longer. Let him feel what it's like to lose someone precious, I thought. Let him wonder if she'll return with her head or without it. Rose unfurled a scroll of her own, her green eyes scanning its contents with practiced efficiency. They lie, Your Grace. My little birds confirm it. Dorne has been amassing provisions and weapons at a rate that suggests preparation for significant conflict. They were preparing for war, likely alongside this, Aegon. Pitiful. I expected a wiser choice from Doran. I nodded. Keep an eye on that. If they stop that preparation, let me know. And send a letter to the Second Sons. They can't stay on the outskirts of Dorne for so long, it's not a place people can live in. Call them here. Understood. Rose nodded. By now, she had proven herself invaluable, expanding the network of spies left behind by Varys and turning many of them to her, and by extension, my service. She also had Petyr Baelish's spies, of course. The whores were her original eyes and ears. Rose was a great helper of mine whom I appreciated. The realm thought her merely a former whore elevated beyond her station. They underestimated her at their peril. What do you plan to do to Dorne, Your Grace? Brienne asked from behind me, speaking for the first time. Her voice carried that peculiar mix of deference and directness that made her such an effective commander. I turned slightly in my chair, meeting her steadfast gaze. I'll just hope that they will reconsider, I said with a cold smile. Prince Doran may be crippled, but he's no fool. He understands what's at stake. No matter the case, Arianne is his heir. So, I hope for her sake that he reconsiders. If not, then, well, you heard what Viserion did to Yunkai and Astapor. The entire chamber fell quiet. I turned to Rose, changing the subject to the more annoying culprit. What news of Varys and this, Aegon? She pursed her lips, clearly displeased with her own lack of concrete information. It's difficult for me to reach Essos with my birds, Your Grace, I'm sorry, she admitted. How bothersome, I said, feeling anger curl through my chest. Regal should be here with me, or at least with my sister. Instead, it served some pretender. I sighed after a moment. Oh well, Dorne and Aegon's situation is merely one concern among many, I continued, my mind shifting to the broader game. We face threats from beyond the wall, across the narrow sea, and within our own borders. I have something to say on that. Robb Stark straightened, producing a letter bearing the Night's Watch seal. Interesting, I accepted it. The parchment was weathered, suggesting a long journey. From my brother John, he explained, his expression growing grim. He reports wildlings fleeing south in unprecedented numbers, claiming the dead walk beyond the wall. I raised an eyebrow, watching Stark's face. I'd warned him about strengthening the wall, and he didn't understand why before. Hopefully Jon's words would give him the reason to. Jon himself claims to have encountered and destroyed one such creature, Robb continued, his voice steady despite the fantastical nature of the claim. A dead man who continued moving and attacking after death. Jon saved the Night's Watch's Lord Commander from that creature. I feigned my skepticism, a bold claim from a bastard at the edge of the world. His jaw tightened at my tone, northern pride flashing in his eyes. Jon Snow is many things, your grace, but a liar is not one of them, he countered sharply. He killed this, white, with fire. Burned it to ash while it still moved. The dragon blood in my veins seemed to warm at the very word, fire. Just having Viserion would give me an incredible edge against the whites, although the true White Walkers themselves were invulnerable to dragon flames. Fire and dragonglass, I murmured after a moment, recalling the details from the TV show. Even in the history books of Red Keep's library, they spoke of the long night, of ice demons driven back by flame and obsidian weapons. Childish tales, most would say, yet I knew the truth. What was that, your grace? Robb asked since I'd spoken too low. The issue with these, White Walkers, will be addressed, I assured him, raising a hand to stop his protest. I'm sending a shipment of dragonglass from Dragonstone to the Wall, along with men to reinforce the Night's Watch. Dragonglass is a special kind of material that can kill wraiths, and perhaps the White Walkers too. The surprise on Stark's face was almost comical. He clearly hadn't expected such swift action on what many would consider a fanciful tale. The North thanks you, he said, inclining his head respectfully. Don't thank me, Robb, I said, leaning forward. If these creatures are true, as your brother says they are, it'll be a danger to us all. Let's take this seriously, yes. And do reinforce the wall before your brother's ravens start reporting armies of corpses marching on the wall. If the situation truly worsens, I'll fly north myself. I thought, imagining Viserion's flames sweeping across legions of walking corpses. Rose cleared her throat delicately. There's one more matter, your grace, she said, producing another scroll. From the Iron Fleet, it seems Queen Yara Greyjoy is returning to Westeros and intends to visit King's Landing. Her letter states she wishes to present the first tribute from the raids of Essos personally and to discuss matters of mutual concern. I felt a smile tug at my lips. Yara's visit wasn't unexpected, though her timing was interesting. That's good news. Arrange suitable accommodations, I instructed. I'm curious what our Iron Queen considers mutual concern. And even more curious to have her in my bed again, I thought, missing her embrace somewhat. She was a fun one in bed. Yara Greyjoy had proven herself both in battle and in more private arenas. Her submission had been particularly sweet. Robb shifted in his seat, standing up. In that case, with your permission, he began, I must return to the north soon. If these reports from Jon are true, Winterfell must be prepared. It has been a long time since they've been here. They would have returned earlier if I hadn't gone to Meereen. I nodded slowly. Of course, the North can't remain indefinitely without its king. I studied him briefly. Will your mother remain here with your sister? Robb had a sad look on his face. Yes, we want to bury our father's remains in the crypts of Winterfell. Lady Sansa seems content with her position, otherwise I'm sure she'd have loved to come for a short visit. Content enough, I thought, recalling Sansa's expression when she saw Arianne. Despite her displeasure, she was learning her place, adapting to her role as my bride with increasing grace. Then our business is concluded for today, I declared, rising from my chair. Rose followed suit immediately. Prepare messages to Dragonstone regarding the dragonglass. And draft a response to Prince Doran, nothing committal, just enough to keep him uncertain. As we filed out, our footsteps carrying us through the hallways, thoughts raced ahead to my next moves. Aegon, Daenerys, the White Walkers, Tywin Lannister, the Vale, so many pieces in motion, so many threats and opportunities intertwined. Chapter 107, Farewell and Confinement. The courtyard of the Red Keep buzzed with activity, horses snorting, hooves scraping on the cobblestones, armor clinking as Stark men got ready to leave. I stood on the keep steps, taking in the cool morning air against my face while I watched it all unfold. Robb Stark moved around his men like he'd done it 1,000 times, his direwolf padding silently at his side. The beast had grown since they got here. It cast an intimidating shadow that reminded everyone of the North's untamed power. Not that it could ever match a dragon's might, of course. I headed down the stairs, stopping near Robb as he finished fiddling with his saddlebags. "King Stark," I greeted, offering my hand. "It's truly sad to see you go. I hope your time in the capital's been enlightening." The North might call him king, but here, in front of me, he was just another lord paying respects. Perhaps he realized that, too. Even if he didn't, I'd let him know by the time the threat of White Walkers become a real problem. He turned, and I could see he felt both relief and tension about heading out. "Morning, Your Grace," he answered, gripping my hand tight with that no-nonsense warrior's grip. And enlightening it was indeed. "Your bravery in the war hasn't gone unnoticed. I hope back north you'll enjoy the reputation of a war hero," I said, letting a bit of warmth creep into my voice. "The alliance between our houses will help keep the realm together." Robb nodded, his expression guarded. "The North remembers its friends, Your Grace, and its enemies." It was a polite threat hidden behind courtesy, perhaps implying what might happen if I betrayed his sister. "Looks like the boy has picked up a thing or two in the south." "As do dragons," I replied with a hint of a smile. His eyes flicked toward the towers where Viserion often perched, then back to me. "There wasn't any bad blood in our exchange, since unlike the Tyrell alliance, built on mutual gain, the Stark alliance was built on exactly that but also trust." "Safe travels, Lord Stark," I said, stepping aside. "May the old gods keep an eye on your road." As he turned to check the last details, something caught my eye. Catelyn Stark came forward from the crowd of northern lords, her auburn hair shining under the morning sun. Sansa was among that crowd too, conversing with the lords, but my eyes remained on her mother. She walked with a steady grace, but those tully blue eyes burned with something when she looked at me, emotion barely held in check. "Mother-in-law," I greeted with a small grin, lowering my voice a notch. "Keep your family safe. The realm's never certain." She stopped right in front of me, jaw set, giving a perfect curtsy. When she stood, her gaze didn't waver. "My loyalty is with my children. Don't mistake my silence for approval, Your Grace," she said, calm but firm. I couldn't help a slight smirk. After all that had happened, she still held her pride, and I found that strangely satisfying. "How fascinating," I murmured, stepping closer so only she could hear. "This fragile dance of ours. You want your family's safety more than anything, don't you, my lady? Such noble devotion, so noble that it led you into my bed last time." A flush crept up her neck, and I couldn't tell if it was anger or something else. Her lips parted, but whatever she meant to say died in the air when Robb called out, "Mother, we have to go." She held my gaze a second longer, full of resolve and a fierce protectiveness that spoke volumes. Then she turned away, moving toward her son with practiced elegance. The Stark party began mounting up, the final farewell settling over the courtyard. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sansa standing rigidly near the horses, her copper hair gleaming in the sun. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears watching her mother and brother get ready to leave. I walked over to her, feeling a twinge of something at how upset she looked. Gently draping an arm around her shoulders, I gave her a reassuring squeeze. "No need to be sad, dear Sansa. Your family won't be alone. Some of my best guards will go with them to the neck," I told her. Sansa glanced up at me, surprise peeking through her sorrow. "Thank you, Your Grace," she whispered. "I worry about them not for their safety, however. I'll miss them." I smiled softly, as any good sister and daughter would, I said, letting my voice soften. "But remember, your place is here now, with me. You'll have to get used to it." Her gaze drifted to her mother, who was swinging onto her horse. Catelyn glanced back just once, her eyes finding Sansa's. There was a lot in that look: love, worry, silent promises. Then Marjorie showed up, her bright smile catching the morning light. "A perfect day for a ride, isn't it?" she said cheerily. "We'll have plenty to discuss once they're gone." I gave a nod, noticing how Marjorie subtly moved a bit closer to me than to Sansa. Seemed unintentional, but it spoke volumes about the unspoken tension between them. "You always have a place here, sweet sister," Marjorie said to Sansa, reaching out to squeeze her hand. It looked sincere, but there was that familiar glint in her eyes, always plotting, always aware of the game. I watched them, both so different, yet both so necessary for my plans, circling each other like cautious wolves. "Marjorie dearest, I'll take Sansa for a walk in the gardens," I declared, looking straight at Marjorie. She needs a break from this bustle. Could you oversee our guest's departure? A quick flash of disappointment flickered on Marjorie's face before she smiled again, masking it in a heartbeat. Of course, Your Grace, she said with a graceful bow. I'd be honored. She drifted away toward the men and horses, and I guided Sansa through a side passage to the gardens. The air smelled sweeter there, alive with roses and jasmine. The two of us strolled in silence for a while, following a twisting path through neatly trimmed flower beds. The gardeners had outdone themselves. Vivid blossoms and thick green leaves made for a perfect backdrop. I slowly lightened the mood with small talk. We talked and watched from here as the horde of northern horses left the city gates. Over the next half an hour, the sadness in Sansa lessened considerably thanks to my presence. Dear husband, she suddenly said, tone a lot more serious than usual. What is your relationship with Arianne Martell? Her voice was quiet, eyes fixed on a patch of blue winter roses. She wouldn't look at me, like she wasn't sure she wanted to know my answer. I paused, turning to face her. It caught me off guard, not the question itself, but that she'd ask it so plainly. Arianne Martell is just another piece on the board, I said, lifting Sansa's chin so she'd meet my gaze. I hold the dragons, the swords, the crown. Did I marry her or you? Such matters don't deserve your worry, Sansa. She's here to serve my interests, nothing more. I did like Arianne's company. Although she was bratty and annoying at first, it had changed over time. Plus she was a lot of fun in the bed, but I had to reassure Sansa. I leaned in, lowering my voice. I will not try to defend my character. I love women, but, remember your place by my side as my wife, Sansa. You aren't just any random woman, you're my wife. You're safe here, always. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, blue eyes like her mother's, but softer. You promise? I set a hand on her shoulder, feeling her relax just a bit under my touch. I promise, silly Sansa. Now, let's enjoy the morning. We've got battles to win, and maybe even a war to fight. We kept walking, and I turned over the latest changes in this ever-evolving chessboard. The Starks heading north would shore up defenses there, useful with what I knew was coming from beyond the wall. Jon Snow's warnings were only the start. True winter was on its way, and it was bringing threats far deadlier than any southern lord. But Sansa didn't need to know all that yet. Some plans were best kept close until the time was right, especially when those plans involved me making her brother take the knee. The corridor leading to Arianne's room was oddly quiet this afternoon. The guards outside her door straightened up when they spotted me, their faces giving away nothing. I waved them off, waiting until I heard their footsteps fade before I pressed my hand against the ornate handle. She wasn't in my bedroom anymore. It'd be insulting to my wives, after all. She had her own chambers, but they were nowhere near a dungeon. They were fit for a Dornish princess, comfortable enough to remind her of her station but locked up enough to show she was still under my control. Everyone in the court gossiped about my so-called merciful imprisonment, but really, it was a message. She was still my prisoner, my fucktoy. I pushed open the door without bothering to knock. Sunlight poured in through the big windows, flooding the room in a warm glow that bounced off polished furniture and silk hangings. Arianne was lounging on her bed, a book forgotten beside her. Her dark hair spilled over the edge of the mattress, contrasting perfectly with her crimson dress. At the noise, she rolled over and stretched lazily, like a satisfied cat. Before her silver eyes locked on mine, she broke into a grin and jumped up in one smooth move. Every step she took had a graceful sway, and the dress she wore, definitely one of Marjorie's, altered to fit her curves, left very little to the imagination. Look who's here, she said, flinging her arms around my neck and pressing herself against me. Her lips brushed my cheek in a teasing welcome. Did you miss me, my Dragon King? I chuckled, breathing in that spicy, citrusy scent she always seemed to carry. You think this is how hostages are supposed to act? I'm here on business, dear prisoner. She leaned back just a bit, eyes shining with mischief. One hand stayed around my neck while the other played idly across my chest. Business? How dull of you, she sighed dramatically. And here I thought you'd come to entertain your poor, lonely, sex-deprived captive. Her fingers kept up their little dance, dipping beneath my doublet's collar. The tension between us crackled. Desire never really went away, no matter the politics or the reasons we had to keep our distance. How are you sex-derived when I fucked you for 3 whole days? Crazy girl, I said. Anyway, I have a letter from your father, I added, trying to steer things back to why I'd really come. He pretends to be innocent and wants you home in Dorne. He's demanding your return. Ariane's playful look vanished, replaced by a flicker of real anger. She stepped back, crossing her arms under her breasts in a way that somehow looked both stubborn and enticing. I don't like why he's acting like this. He's always been so smart, but what's he doing now? Fucking hell. She said, her accent growing thicker as her emotions rose. He could have just apologized now and I'd have handled the rest. You'd do well not to take his demands too seriously, Viserys. I watched her, taking in the genuine frustration on her face. It was fun. Ariane turning against her father was a big deal in Dornish politics, one I fully intended to use to my advantage. Don't worry, I'm not returning you so soon. That's it, I need to go now, I said abruptly, turning toward the door. There are things I have to attend to. Do you really have to ignore me like this? She purred, her voice dropping low. She crossed the room slowly, each movement meant to highlight the curve of her body. I'm so lonely here, Daddy, I raised a brow, smirking at her theatrical approach. You're not exactly some damsel in distress in this safe castle, Ariane. You're more like a royal guest, with more perks than most in my court. Well, whatever, she sighed, giving up her attempt. Her expression went through a change then. Her silver gaze bored into mine, a hint of genuine vulnerability showing through her usual confidence. Ah, speaking of that, what about Tyene and the others? Are they? The question hung in the air, heavier than her flirty words. I saw her playful facade slip a bit, concern taking over. They're alive, rest assured. I'm keeping them in the dungeons, I replied, watching her face. After trying to poison me, they're facing the consequences. I have no intention of letting them off easy. Ariane's expression darkened, her bravado slipping. She took a step closer. No more sultry smiles or teasing. That's not good. They must be feeling so tortured. Please, Viserys, she said, her voice wavering a bit. At least let me see Tyene. She's my friend. I'll get her on your side. It can't be that hard to arrange. I studied her carefully. It was her who warned me about them, so I'd expected their betrayal. The sand snakes had tried to kill me, usually a straight path to a grisly end. But their ties to Dorne, and Ariane's loyalty, made them valuable. Killing them would be a waste. Plus they'd been helpful to me in the past. Letting her meet Tyene could serve as a reminder to Ariane of what happens to those who betray me. All right, I said after a moment's thought. You can speak with her. Maybe you'll talk some sense into her for real. Relief flooded her features, followed by a cunning smile. She closed the gap again, pressing her body to mine. Thank you, really, she whispered, lips hovering near my ear. Her hands slid up my chest, resting on my shoulders. My hands wrapped around her slip waist, sliding down to cup her soft ass. I knew you had a reasonable side. Although I enjoyed the feel of her body, I had to remind her of the situation. I caught her wrists, pulling them away, not hard, but firmly. Don't confuse my calculated mercy with weakness, princess. Your friend did try to poison me, and that usually ends in an execution. Ariane's smile stayed in place, but I saw her eyes harden. Of course, sweetheart, and I'll be sure she'll apologize to you for that. Since you like feeling your ego so much. The push and pull of our relationship was always shifting, friends in one moment, enemies in the next, and lovers whenever we both felt like it. Exhausting, but also thrilling. Ariane was one of the few people here who came close to treating me like an equal. A risky move on her part, but one I allowed for now. She was amusing. I'll set it up for tomorrow, I said, heading for the door. You'll be under guard, obviously. Obviously, she echoed, giving a small curtsy while flashing me a look of genuine gratitude. Until then, I'll just have to find other ways to keep busy. As I stepped out, I found myself smiling. In another time or place, Ariane Martell might have been a truly great queen. Maybe she still would be, depending on where the pieces landed in all the fights to come. The Game of Thrones rolled on, getting more tangled by the day. And in the darkness far beyond this petty power struggle, the real enemy was getting stronger, the Night King and his undead horde, all set to move south while we fought each other. Thankfully, one of my prized conquests returned to reassure me soon. By the time Ariane was done talking to Tyene, the Queen of the Ironborns was at my shore.